clear. I haven't received any apologies. Okay. Okay, agenda item 2. Committee input on FOA matters during summer recess. It is normal practice for committees to delegate authority to myself and the Deputy Chairperson during periods of recess to submit views on releasing or withholding of information in any non-routine or contentious FOA request received. In the previous mandate, at the final meeting of each session, the committee agreed to this delegation of authority, and that the committee would be advised of any such requests, the views expressed by the Chairperson and/or Deputy Chairperson, and the response issued by the FOA unit at the first available meeting following the recess period. Are you content that we continue that practice? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3 then, the draft minutes. Are members content with the draft minutes?
Great.
Okay, so they'll now be published online. Agenda item 4 then is our oral briefing from UFU and NIAPA. NIAPA. Okay, our first oral briefing then is from UFU and NIAPA, and NIAPA are not here yet, but what we'll do is we'll let Ulster Farmers Union begin, and then when NIAPA join us, hopefully they'll be able to give us their brief. Okay, there is UFU's paper is at page 13 of your packs, a copy of the annual report, page 15 to 16 top table, and NIAPA's briefing paper is at page 16. I'd like to welcome our members from UFU, Mr Barclay Bale, Wesley Aston and Victor Chestnut. And if you want to take up to about 3 minutes each, we're very time constrained today, unfortunately. And I suppose, as I've already said to the members, we're really here on a listening brief from yourselves today, in terms of that we have refined it down to say that we want to discuss Brexit, because that's the big issue for agriculture at the minute, I would imagine. So if you want to go ahead and...
Thank you very much, Chair. And possibly the paper that you have in front of you may well be slightly different from what we have ended up discussing today. But certainly within the Ulster Farmers Union, the whole debate has kicked off around the Brexit issue. We did hold an executive meeting last night where there were a lot of different opinions. I think certainly it's the uncertainty probably out there at the present time. I think that's what men are worried about. They would dearly love answers. I suppose we had to remind them it was only Wednesday, that the result came out on Friday. But as I say, the process has kicked off both internally and externally with ourselves, and certainly we will be doing a lot of work with the other unions across the UK, and as well as that with the IFA in the south. So certainly the number one item on the agenda for any of our farmers certainly is the continuation of direct support. How that will look, I suppose, is anybody's guess. What the pot of money will be anybody's guess. But when you consider that last year 87% of farm income was made up from direct support, I think it's critical that we all move forward in trying to get the best possible deal from Whitehall on our fair share of money for Northern Ireland. When we consider that there are so many jobs linked to the whole agri-food industry, I think it is critical that we as unions and yourselves as politicians certainly fight the corner very, very hard that we do get a fair share of the money, whatever that might be. I think the other things certainly that we feel are critical, certainly around all markets, whether they be the home market, whether it be trying to get produce into the EU, and certainly I think trying to open new markets, and the fact that we think there have been blockages previously in Whitehall around opening new markets. So certainly I think that is something needs to be pushed as well. And I think if there was ever a time for a marketing body, we have heard it discussed on many occasions over the past few years since the Agri-Food Strategy Report, Going for Growth, that we were going to have a new marketing body. So I think certainly if there was ever a time for that marketing body, it is now. You know, it has to be a well-resourced marketing body, not a half stab at it. You know, this has to be something well-resourced to compare probably with something like Scottish Food and Drink or Bord Bia. And I think certainly that is another issue that we would like seen to be pushed forward. Of course, the whole issue around agri-environment schemes, farm business investment schemes, the farm business investment scheme, certainly we want to see that rolled out as quickly as possible. And
only have about 1 minute left, so I just
okay.
I don't want to put pressure, but I suppose
I think you know those probably are the 3 or 4 key areas that we feel are the main ones at the minute, and certainly we're happy probably to leave it at that at the minute and take the questions.
Okay, William.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You do say that there are concerns ahead, but would you also accept that there are opportunities ahead for the agriculture sector?
Well, I think certainly we're starting off with a clean slate, and when you're starting off with a clean slate, there probably are opportunities in there. Regulation, you know, is something I suppose farmers always, you know, they're anxious about regulation. Certainly, we would like to think that whatever the way is forward, that new regulation would be less bureaucratic, that there are simpler ways of doing things, and you know that has to be an opportunity. That has to be a plus point. I think the biggest concern, I suppose, currently would be, you know, I said direct support, and that the market opportunities, we need to get probably new market opportunities opened up, and there's opportunities there as well, but you know, I suppose the biggest threat is really what direct support will look like, and certainly we're pushing ahead next week now. We're going to pull all our committee chairmen together, and we'll lock them away in a room for a day and thrash this one about and see, you know, what we might come up with, how it might look, or what the suggestions might be. But accept that, yes, there are opportunities.
Barclay, just in terms of the direct support, I'm assuming that you will have had or will be having meetings with the Minister in terms of that?
Yeah.
And what the expectation would be. I suppose just in terms of what has previously been direct support through EU, we have been, I suppose, to an advantage here in the north, even in terms of against Scotland, England and Wales. What is our argument going to be in terms of whenever we're asking the Minister, or have you given the Minister that information on what we should be arguing for in terms of the direct support and why we should be at an advantage or above those, because they are going to be in there arguing against that obviously now, and that would just be a concern for myself.
I think it's very much back to the fact that when you look at last year's farm incomes, you know, 87% of farm income came from direct support. Farmers dearly would love to be getting much more from the marketplace, but as it stands, we're not. And you know, certainly going forward, if that direct support is not there, farmers simply will not be there. But it may well be an opportunity to reshape the direct support in some way. That's what we're sitting down next week to do. You know, there could be different ways of giving this direct support, and I think certainly there's a feeling probably that you know, we certainly do need to look at production agriculture, and that the direct support could be geared towards production agriculture.
Okay. Patsy?
Yep. Thanks very much, Chair. I'm just looking at your briefing document here, and there's, forgive me for saying so, there's a bit of an anomaly in it. One of the headings says continued EU support for agriculture. Maybe this is how I'm reading this, but maximum EU support must continue to be provided directly to agriculture. Additional assistance must be provided to vulnerable sections within the agricultural industry. We've just had the Brexit.
Yeah, I think that's maybe in my comments at the start, Patsy. The document maybe you received was pre-Brexit.
Right.
So,
right, well,
so and it wasn't.
It's a week old, Patrick.
That's
all right. But it does. Now, I'm trying to grapple with this. I'm hearing from some of your members. I'm hearing from other small farmers, and some of them are utterly shocked. They're in a state of shock about what has happened. 87% of their income is no longer secured for as long as it would have been anyway. But they are trying to come to terms with this, and I'm trying to come to terms with it because politically it's a bigger project than just farming. But I seriously don't know how this is going to be resolved. We're into no land, we're into circumstances where even the stuff that has been presented to us through the rural development programmes to help farmers support and diversify, I just honestly don't have any answers because of the situation and the uncertainty and that leap over the cliff that has happened in relation to what was solidified farm income. So I'm empathising with you, but I really don't know where we go after this. And probably there are questions best answered by the department as to what, if any, dialogue has taken place with DEFRA. What, if any, thinking has even occurred at DEFRA as to where this is likely to go, or as to what support might exist for the food and farm and agri-food sectors, and before we even move on to the rural development and stuff. So, genuinely, I don't know where we're going.
No, I mean, and I think, as I say, that was probably a comment from our executive meeting last night. It is the uncertainty at the present time. Possibly, if you had asked this question to people, the referendum question to people 3 or 4 years ago, you might have got a different answer. But I think where we are now with farming, where the agri-industry is and has been in a crisis this past 18 months, I think for a lot of people they had decided that the system wasn't working, and you know, that I think it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction at the present time.
And a knee-jerk reaction to world economic climates as opposed to just EU.
Well,
Sorry, we're asking members to
No, that's okay. Sorry,
just
Chair.
to give as many people as possible, and also to keep
that.
our questions brief.
Okay, thanks, Linda.
Statements, just questions. David?
Thanks, Chair. Berkeley, you talked about production support being a key issue of income for farmers. Some of us would also see issues like agri-environment schemes producing goods which are appreciated by the wider community. Accepting that those who campaign for Brexit haven't actually got any plan A at this stage, how far has the thinking of the Union gone in terms of how different schemes might develop?
No, well, I think really that's where we kick off next Wednesday when we do pull our chairman all together. But I think there is an acceptance within the Union as well that the environmental issues will not go away, that it's something we will have to face up to, and that there will be some sort of, if you want to call it a hybrid model or whatever, where you will see crossover between environmental and direct support. I suppose a lot of the work of the Sustainable Land Use Group, which John Gillian chaired, and I suppose would have been geared very much towards EU funding. I think now some of that may well cross over at this time. I mean, that, I suppose, is what we want our committees to discuss. But, I mean, there's an acceptance throughout agriculture that what's good for farming is good for the environment, and vice versa, and we have to build those linkages as well.
Thanks.
Thank you. Robin?
Thanks, Chair. Bartley, you mentioned that the reliance now on direct funding was due to Whitehall. The Secretary of State has made it very clear yesterday that it will come as a payment to the Northern Ireland Assembly, and agriculture will be competing with hospitals, education and everything else for that amount of money. What conversations have you had to date with our Agricultural Minister or Finance Minister to try and put your case forward to this early intervention?
There's been one brief meeting at this stage, and really, I suppose it was just initial thoughts. There's been nothing thrashed out at this stage. I think certainly our impression was that there is a commitment from both the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Economy to work together on this, when they do realise that so many jobs are dependent on the agri-food processing sector here in Northern Ireland, that it's one of the key industries and it has to be supported.
Minister of Finance, no, just I'm in agriculture.
Yeah.
You haven't had the Finance.
No.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Robin. I'd just like to welcome our members from NAIAPA here today, Michael Clark and Jim Carmichael. And I'm going to allow them to make their short presentation. We have 3 minutes for a presentation, and then we can continue with the questions. I know you have a question, Sydney, but do you mind if we do this presentation first? And then we can continue with the questions, and we have to be finished by 10:40. So, again, members can keep the questions brief, and if the respondents can keep the responses brief.
Okay, Chair. Now, first of all, apologise. Look, I think there's a mix-up in the times. We have an opinion that it was at 10:40, but it's possibly our fault. And thanks for the opportunity to address you. The broad concerns expressed in our initial submission are the same as we wish to ensure the long-term future of our industry and security for the next generation who will be inheriting farm businesses. From a farm income perspective, we are acutely aware of the impact of farm subsidies on businesses. We'll take 2015, 183 million from active farming, compared with 236 subsidies. 87% of the average farm business income came from direct payments from CAP. We are in the unfortunate position of having to depend on subsidies to maintain our industry, as farm gate prices bear no relation to cost of production. Farmers would much prefer to receive a realistic price for produce than depend on subsidies. Given our dependence, however, in relation to Brexit, we must have concerns with regard to the long-term future of farm support measures. Much has been said about the fact that the money saved by the UK could be redistributed, but the fact is we do not know how much this might be, or the pro-rata distribution. Taking into consideration that Northern Ireland receives more per hectare than other UK regions, and that there will have to be a renegotiation, there is a distinct possibility, or even probability, that we would face a reduced budget from the UK. We need a coordinated negotiation from Northern Ireland with the understanding of our industry to achieve the optimum result. At present, what is needed is an unequivocal statement from our Minister and DAERA to inform us where exactly we stand in relation to our present budget under CAP. We hear CAP support is guaranteed until 2019, but what about the review in 2017? It has been said that a weaker sterling will assist our exports, but what about imports of feed, fuel, fertiliser? A major cause for concern is that we knew of CAP reform and were in need of new environmental schemes, capital grant schemes, etc. It took so long to finalise details of new proposals and implementation of projects, example within the present CAP. Approximately 1 year will have elapsed before farmers can apply for any of these new schemes. Agriculture is in such a precarious state that we cannot allow time lags in negotiations for the future. At present, we are in a situation where some second stage appeals are taking almost 3 years to reach actual panel hearing stage. We could have totally exited Europe, while some producers still might not have resolution to a previous problem. In relation to ANC payments, we need to know the potential impact of Brexit on these. Also, on the rural development, which is a big source of income to our areas. That's more or less our opening summary.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I'll just continue with the people who have indicated that they want to ask a question, and then just indicate who you want to ask it of. So, Sydney.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Apparently, you tell us that the executive held a meeting last evening.
Yes.
Yes. There was a lot of uncertainty was maybe coming through the meeting, but you know that's to be expected that you will get uncertainty. But you know, you also said in your presentation that you're looking for continued direct support to farmers, which we're hearing is coming through as 87%, opening up of new markets on the farm business investment such like to continue. But you know, there has been a lot of doom and gloom since the referendum vote. You've heard from certain quarters, and we've all heard it. I don't see it as that. My experience prior to the referendum on the recent local or the recent assembly election, I spoke to many farmers, and I can assure you that they were all, not all, I got a few, but most of them wanted to see they wanted to see change, and they wanted to see exit from the EU. That's what they're telling me. So my question would be, would you agree with me that the vast majority of farmers see this as a great and ideal opportunity to re-establish farming as a valid industry going forward? They see really this is an opportunity to bring forward some of the issues you're talking about this morning.
If I can ask the response to be as brief as possible, because I think that both organisations should get an opportunity to respond to that. Okay.
I think whether you were inside or outside the EU, I think farmers accepted all around that change was needed. And I mean, for those that wanted to remain, they wanted to do it within the structures of the EU. Other people wanted out to do it in a completely new way. So, I mean, we as an organisation, there were very mixed views within our own organisation, and I wouldn't say, you know, that every farmer out there wanted to leave. I mean, as I say, there was a very diverse range of views within the organisation, and it is such a complex discussion that. Complex arguments that, you know, as I say, I think there were arguments for change within the EU, and there were arguments for change outside the EU. So, I think that would be a summary of where our own organisation.
That it shouldn't all be doom and gloom, but this maybe is an opportunity to change things and to put farming back to a good footing.
I think number one, huge uncertainty. I think is what people are worried about. You know, certainly at our executive last night, people wanted answers. We don't have those answers at the minute. Yes, there may well be opportunities, but there also are huge challenges. And, you know, the number one challenge is the direct support. And will we have that pot of money? And probably, you know, we will see Scotland probably, you know, thinking that they should be getting a bit of our money. So, you know, there are concerns out there as well. It's not all about that we're sailing into the new world.
Okay, Michael, do you want to respond?
Well, look, we all recognise, look, we would have had different views, as Barclay says, but by and large, look, we're dependent, 87% of our income really is made up from subsidies. Can anybody here tell me that Westminster, with their history of not even agreeing with CAP, that they're going to subsidise that to the same extent? They don't even agree that that type of farming is value for money. Now, I would love to think that going forward that we could do without that. And until we get a guaranteed price for our produce and a profit, that's not going to happen. And, you know, I don't know where this farmers are coming from that they think they're going to be better off. You know, hopefully, and I would love to see it, but looking back, look, Westminster never really supported CAP.
I could say a word there too, just at the minute, and the paper we put forward, we talked about the viability of farms. Now, if farms aren't viable, people aren't going to continue in agriculture. There are two sources of income to farm. There's market returns and there's financial subsidies, which some people may refer to as social payments. Farmers would much rather get a return from the marketplace. If this means we are where we are at the minute, we have had our vote. But if it means that somewhere somebody's going to come up with new markets, that's one thing that has to be researched. The price that's been received for produce at the minute, in anybody's eyes, in any commodity in agriculture, is not giving a return to let people continue. So we are, as Barclay has said, we have had the same with our committees. The uncertainty is there. How do we replace in the short term what's there? But how do we get our markets in the long term to cover all of this? Now, this is what has to be looked at. And from our perspective, the MLAs around this table have to all get together to try and get some sort of a deal to the UK that we can replace or have something to work on until such times as markets can sustain the agricultural industry. At the present minute, it's very obvious to anybody that's dealing with agriculture as a business that the marketplace is not giving the return to sustain the
Just
industry.
a comment, really, what you're actually agreeing, it's not a question, you're really agreeing with what I'm saying. We're in the EU and farming industry right across all the sectors in the bad place. So what you're actually saying this morning is that if we stay in the EU, we could be no better off. So here is an opportunity. What I'm saying, here is an opportunity that has been given on my discussions, on my
Sorry, Cindy, we don't
all
have
across.
time for statements. We need to allow everybody
with
to
the
get an
farming
opportunity
industry
to
was
ask
that
questions.
SAS is an opportunity. All I'm saying, that's just an opportunity.
Harold?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Ever since the introduction of single farm payment, if you listen to the radio, very often the farmers condemn for this single farm payment, this money, and then it would have been through back to the consumer. Yes, but that's keeping your price of your loaf down. From £1 it could be £3. With regard to get a return from the marketplace, will that mean an increase in the price of the food on the shelf? Is that what it will eventually mean?
Well, I think if you listen to some of the politicians in the mainland, certainly they had even talked the price of food would come down. So I think I don't honestly think you'll see food prices rise. I mean, we have a cheap food policy, and I reckon that will be here to stay.
But that's only the back of single farm payment.
Sir, if I come in that stage, that's in relation to the market. The market, irrespective of the support arrangements around this, the market will actually dictate what happens, whether it's imports or whether it's locally produced product. And I think what we have to look at is what the market will return. We want to try and improve it. We want to have other market opportunities. But equally, while we aren't actually making money on what we produce, we need some form of support to bridge the gap. And whether it's from Europe or whether it's from the UK, that's the important thing. We have to secure that funding going forward. We have to look at how it's distributed across the UK, and then we have to reshape it based on what we need here to try and minimise bureaucracy and all those sorts of things as well.
We wouldn't agree that prices would really have to rise. We think that there's enough room for manoeuvre there, and the price between the farm gate and the consumer for everybody to get a fair share. We believe that the supermarkets and to a lesser extent the processors are taking too much. If you take for an example an animal killed at £1,200, the farmer is netting at £2,800 and said we'll say a month. So surely there's room there for everybody to get a cut of the cake. We're just not getting enough of it. We're just at the behest of the people above us. So really, it's false to say that food price would have to rise enormously just because farmers got a better price.
Thank you. Okay, Kiva?
I think we all do accept that there are major challenges and opportunities that can be explored. You have mentioned the need for the marketing body, and I would agree that is necessary to try and exploit some of those opportunities. And you've also mentioned the need for better return on product and stuff like that. Do you see a role for the supply chain forum in that, or an expansion of that type of discussion forum to try and improve that return on product.
So supply chain forum, I suppose, has met a few times. Certainly, I would like to see it probably make more progress. I think certainly another area maybe that would help in all of this is public procurement. Let's support local produce going into health service wherever, and I would like to think that that could be pushed up the agenda, that more of our own food will be going into public procurement, and I think that possibly could have a huge effect. Not a huge effect, but it could have an effect on better demand for local produce. But certainly, as I say, I think the supply chain, I think we do need to see some sort of results out of that if it is to be of any real value.
Thank you.
I would agree that at the end of the day, if we're going to set up forum, top and shop, or whatever you want to call it, we need to see results, because as we alluded to in the paper here before, it's the same actually what's going forward from a year today. We seem to take that long here to react or respond to anything that's happening. As Michael Clark said earlier on, we knew reform of CAP was coming every so many years. We never seemed to be adequately prepared. We weren't prepared to come in immediately when funding was available for anything, and we can't allow that to happen going forward from here. We know that there have to be changes. We need to look for changes. Committees have been set up here, as far as I'm aware, and I agree with Barclay. If we're going to have food chain forum and so on, so we need to see results from that, or at least concepts or ideas going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Edwin. And we're just asking questions to be kept brief because we have to finish here at 10:40. So to allow the response time to respond.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd have to say Farmers Union were badly out of touch on this issue, and I got that round the doors over and over again. What are the unions now going to do to take advantage of the lower pound in ensuring that milk and beef prices and pork prices in particular actually get a push up? So what's happening with the processors? What are you doing in terms of looking at how we can move away from the regulatory system that has been imposed upon agriculture as a result of the European Union, and identifying how we can meet good standards for supermarkets, but not the nonsense of standards that was imposed upon us by the European Union?
Well, I think starting maybe with your last question about standards, I think I was speaking to a vegetable grower the other day, and his very words were that it wasn't EU regulation that set the standards as far as him supplying vegetables to the supermarkets go. It was the retailer who drove those standards.
We're not talking about them, we're talking about the standards like having to clean out drains and getting permission to cut a largely overgrown shrub and so forth. There's a load of standards there that supermarkets don't apply that Europe does, so can we stick to that, Mr. Bell?
Well, we can talk about any sort of standards, but
ones that we can deal with, though.
Well, I'm not sure. Regulation, and I think it would be very wrong of all farmers to think that regulation is going to disappear. Regulation, there will be regulation, and when you do look, perhaps even at the Norwegian model, and every standard in Norway, I think, bar I think it's maybe the water framework standard there, and I think even in Norway that's a higher standard than within the EU. So I think farmers needn't they could have false expectations in all of this. So regulation standards, we reckon they're here to stay. It will be different. Bureaucracy may look simpler. I mean, the like of things like the 3-crop rule, greening, we would like to think that the like of those sort of things would disappear. But back to your question then on about the pound, about the falling pound, everything else, I think we have to accept that we now only are at Thursday. The result came out last Friday. We can't do everything in a week. But the unions will progress as quickly as we can on all these issues.
Can I answer that? Look, regulations, a lot of them are good regulations, environmental and all that. Look, Europe has brought them in, and a lot of the time we, along with the Farmers Union, have been fighting against them. This is not new. We have been fighting against them, but unfortunately some of them that come here are gold-plated by local, you know, which are enforced more so than they're required to be. And to answer Edwin's point about the standards in the food, like a lot of that, as Barclay says, is imposed falsely by the supermarkets, and they say that's what the consumer wants. We had a big campaign here, both of us, against the four movements, which was brought on not by Europe, but by the supermarkets, and they said the consumer wanted this, but there was no research ever done by any with consumers. This is all falsely imposed by the supermarkets to try and fit their market and to drive down prices for the farmer.
Thank you. We're run out of time, and I know that you want to back in, William, so did Oliver also want in, but unfortunately we have a lot to get through this morning. That doesn't preclude you from putting your questions in writing, and Della will certainly get a response to any questions that we have, and I'm sure this will not be the last time that we will be meeting with yourselves on this issue. Thank you very much for coming and making your presentations, and like, next time we'll have more answers from both sides. Thank you.
Apologies again for being late.
As long as I'm upright, that's good.
Okay, members, our next briefing is going to be from NIE, and that's at page 19 in your packs.
Yeah, it's the briefing.
Next one.
Brexit.
And just to make members aware that most of the briefings that have been given to us were pre-Brexit, so and obviously now we're in a very different position, to the least. I'd like to welcome Patrick Casement, Chairperson of NIEL, Craig McGuckin, CEO of NIEL, Sean Kelly, Parliamentary Development Officer, Jennifer Fulton, Chief Executive, Ulster Wildlife, and Joanne Sherwood, Director of RSPBNA. Thank you very much, and again, we're tight to time, so I'm asking members to keep their questions brief and answers brief. We have 30 minutes for this, and if you can just stick to 5 minutes for the presentation, give members as much time as possible to ask questions, okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. We've actually brought a new briefing paper along. Is that being distributed? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So sorry for that being late, but you'll understand in the circumstances. So thanks very much for having us here today. I'm going to start by making a few sort of general observations, and then I'll move into a few points. And I'm afraid to say that a lot of what we're going to say is really questions, because there's so much uncertainty in it. So a lot of this is really, where do we go next? And it's a start of a discussion, I suppose. The starting point, I think, is to say that we all work in the environment because we feel the environment is essential for people. The environment underpins our society, our health, our economy, our communities. And the EU, for whatever faults you may think it's had, it has set out a very wide range of environmental protection. And there's two things which are crucial in this. Number one, it's essential that Northern Ireland, and whatever happens, Northern Ireland maintains the highest level of environmental protection possible. And secondly, the investment that the EU has put into the environment needs to be maintained. It's essential that the environment in Northern Ireland continues to receive at least that level of support. And the last thing I'm going to say in this introductory section is that Environment Link as an organisation has around 80 full members, including Ulster Wildlife and RSPB. There's more than 100,000 members of the public are members of these organisations. And so we're very pleased to be here today, and we do want to work with the committee in this in the future. I'm going to move on and just talk about a few of the issues and a few of the questions. you'll see in the paper that we start off by talking about the directives, and the EU directives are the cornerstone of environmental protection, and that in turn is also, I suppose, the cornerstone of finance, of the funding of the environment. Recent review of the nature directives had the highest response ever, so people in Europe and in the UK in particular are interested in the environment. And there's a table there which is taken from the IEEB report, and it's quite interesting. It just shows you the different eventualities if the UK is within the European Economic Area or if there's a full Brexit. And I won't go through the detail of it, but you can see there the level of uncertainty. So a few points then. In the absence of the EU directives, what will the driver for environmental protection be? How will the issues be prioritised? Similarly, what level of financial support will be available? Thirdly, environment cuts across national boundaries. In the absence of EU membership, what will be the mechanism to ensure that we're still working together and getting the best outcomes for the environment? In terms of national legislation, there's a huge amount. There's 40 years' worth of legislation within the UK itself. How are we going to review that legislation? And that's complicated by the fact of the recent central government restructuring. DAERA have lost around 400 staff, so there's an issue as to how they're going to be able to review all of that legislation. In the future, will Northern Ireland be in a situation to devise legislation by ourselves? Will we work with the UK? With regards to funding programmes themselves, many of them run to 2020. Will this money be safeguarded? In many cases, NI government has agreed to provide match funding. Again, will this be honoured? How do we ensure that? Given the environment and farming industries, the importance of the CAP payments, any decline in this would have a devastating social, economic and environmental impact. So again, how do we ensure that that doesn't happen? There are certain measures which require investment in research, both the Going for Growth strategy and the Sustainable Agricultural Land Use strategy. Environmental NGOs themselves, we have a key role to play in helping government deliver on these objectives. So we need ways to lever in the additional funds. If there's no EU funding, there's an issue there. And similarly, I would just say that the sector itself has been through a tough time, of course. This time last year, we were all facing big funding cuts. So it's a particularly uncertain time for the sector. And I'm just going to finish now with two kind of practical points, maybe for your consideration. Firstly, we're at the start of the Programme for Government consultation process. We've now got Brexit. Is there something here that means we need to reconsider the way that the PFG has been written? Do we need to lengthen the consultation time? And secondly, again, given the nature of this issue, we feel that there's an argument for the committee here to hold an inquiry into the impact of Brexit on agriculture and environment. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. And as I outlined at the beginning, it probably really is very much a listening brief for us here today in terms of what your concerns are, so that we can put questions to the Minister and the Department. And we will be having the Permanent Secretary is coming to present to us. Has the Minister been in touch with yourselves yet in terms of a meeting? Okay.
We've written a letter to the Minister.
Okay, requesting me. I do think that the Minister should be contacting yourselves and all of the organisations that are going to be affected in terms of this, that under her department. I do think that it's important that we acknowledge that this is no longer Agriculture Department, it is now Agriculture and Environment, and I think that, we need to be very cognizant of that, and I can assure you that the members on this committee will be, and we'll do our best to make sure that both sides of this committee get an equal hearing. So just to reassure you of that on behalf of
Thank you. That's good.
On behalf of myself as chairperson of the committee, and I sincerely hope that all the members of the committee would be of the same view. I'm going to allow Patsy to come in first, just to ask a question, and again, questions brief.
Thank you for your presentation and distilling it down pretty sharp as you have done. The one bit, and a lot of this stuff concerns me, obviously, and we're leapt over the cliff and into that void, that big black void of uncertainty. But you mentioned there many of the current EU funding programmes due to run 2020. Can you give us any indication as to the types of programmes, the types of projects, indeed, that yourselves maybe collectively or otherwise are aware of or involved in? The sorts of things that those are, please, just.
Well, I could maybe give you an example from our own organisation and look across the sectors. So at the minute, we are recruiting about 5 rural jobs from a life bid, which is matched by HLF. Now, we're hopeful that that will continue because the letter of agreement has been signed by Brussels, but we have asked for confirmation.
Sorry, what are those jobs for, please?
Those are for conservation officers in the field. But we are hopeful that that programme will continue. The problem will be the exchange rate fluctuations, which are very difficult to manage because when you sign up to a European programme, you're given money in euros. And the match then has to cater for any sort of exchange rate fluctuations. So that's the challenge for all of the NGOs. We have Interreg, which has a large amount of money. There's about 30 million euros across the 3 streams of Interreg. That will run out to 2020. The money is not yet awarded, but is in the process. We're all in stage 2 business plans. Some of the organisations here, people like AFB, lots of different organisations, maybe like Queen's, will be availing of that money. So there's a lot of uncertainty around that. When you do look at the Article 50 process, there is the opportunity that you can phase out any EU programmes, but that's, again, very uncertain and something for the negotiations. Then there's what happens after the end of those 7 years, because all that money will disappear.
Okay.
I mean, an example of an Interreg programme is the Causeway Coast and Glens Heritage Trust are running a project called Drifting Apart, looking at continental drift. It involves 3 other European countries, Norway, Iceland, Greenland, and again, they're employing people to carry out this work, and they are leading the project across Europe. So that is going to be a real challenge for them how to deal with it.
What's the project again? Just
this is called Drifting Apart. It's to do with looking at the researching into. It's a geological project, but it is environmental in that aspect. But it's looking at our geological history.
Thanks,
okay.
Chair.
I'm going to move on to David.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned this, well, you suggested the committee consider an inquiry into the potential effects on agriculture and environment, now that the decision to leave has been taken, whatever exactly that means. I can see the merit in that, but where do we get the expertise to make it worthwhile having an inquiry at this stage, given that you'll have heard the farming representatives and you say we've got lots of questions, but nobody's got any answers yet?
I think that if you take the environmental sector, we obviously have very strong connections across the UK, and I would be fairly confident that if you look across the UK, the level of expertise is there actually. I think that there are enough people there that understand the implications, and there was work done prior to the vote. I think that the experts are there, but you'd be looking outside Northern Ireland, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, we already have a commission. There was a report done by the Institute of European Environmental Policy, commissioned by some of the environmental organisations pre the vote, and I'm sure we'll be collating further information. We're part of a Europe-wide network called BirdLife International, EU, or worldwide network rather than Europe. So I'm sure there will be information coming along. I think it's a question of timing. It's very soon after the vote.
Okay. William?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you talk about uncertainty, and would you accept that we're told that it'll take somewhere between 2 and 3 years for the UK to actually leave Europe? Is it not the case that there's plenty of time to negotiate? It's not 2 or 3 years. And I think there's a lot of panic. Am I not right? I mean, we're panicking today. We're going to be in Europe for at least not 2 years, maybe 3 years.
I think panic is perhaps too strong a word for what we're describing. I think we're talking about uncertainty here. A lot of organisations in the environmental sector have very small capacity to actually deal with what they're doing. They are struggling just to do what their core purpose is. To spend a lot of time looking again at things that they had hoped and thought were settled is going to be difficult for them to find that capacity to do that. And I think that's going to be a real issue. And I think it's not just an issue for us, it's an issue for you, and it's an issue for the government departments, is finding the capacity to deal with all of this. You say 2 or 3 years is a long time. it'll be gone very rapidly, I fear. But I think it does give us an opportunity. You're correct in that. But I think it is going to put everybody under pressure to do that. And I think that I think the main thrust of what we're saying is that the uncertainty is going to be difficult to deal with for everybody in this.
And maybe if I could add, things like agri-environment schemes, business continuity is very important for farmers and others. Also, as NGOs, we manage some of those sites and avail of that money to actually manage on-ground works. So those types of issues need to be part of any negotiation as we move forward. And there needs to be a long-term view, because once things start to go downhill, they're very difficult to retrieve.
Yeah, but you would accept there is time to do all this, I think.
When you look at the Rural Development Programme negotiations, we're sitting in 2016 and some of it's still not up and running. They're very complex mechanisms that take a lot of thinking time. And if you're going to change things, you want to do it properly once, so it may take longer than 2 years.
Yeah, I think we're well aware here that negotiations can take a long time.
Sorry, Joanne just wanted to add something to that, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm going to ask that you are going to have to keep your responses brief, because we are very tight to time. I'm trying to allow as many members in as possible to ask questions, if you don't mind. Edwin, sorry.
Yeah, a lot of the environmental policies make sense. So, recycling of goods and instead of casting virgin stuff into landfill, renewable energy and so forth, all of that makes an awful lot of sense. So, an awful lot of that should go forward. In fact, renewables like solar panels will actually benefit from getting out of Europe, because they have, you can buy solar panels in from China at 2/3 of the price, and you won't actually need to grant it to ensure that more people actually install solar panels. But you have made mention of the common fisheries policy in that paper, and sticking with it. Has common fisheries policy not been a complete and ultimate disaster for the fishing fleet in Northern Ireland in the first instance? Has it not been a disaster environmentally, in that many fish which would have went for human consumption has been dumped in the sea? And it has not been a disaster scientifically, because every year in December there's been a bartering session which has ignored the science and it's just sought to impose further restrictions without the backup of science.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chair, if I may answer that. I think in terms of like the fisheries policy, I think the environment sector wouldn't have championed necessarily everything that comes out of the European Commission and out of European institutions. I mean, we're aware of the fact that undoubtedly that one size doesn't fit all, and it has to be has to be designed to be location specific. But I think, as we've said, there is still the opportunity to look at everything again. It's just, as I said, it's the uncertainty as where we can start in terms of actually putting some certainty into this, because no matter what sector, where it's the fishing industry, where it's the agricultural industry, it's actually what is our starting point. And I think it'll be interesting, because it's I think we've referred to one of our papers, is that one of the issues we'll have to look at is, in the absence of some of these directives that have come from Europe, is what will our priorities be? How will Northern Ireland decide what our priorities will be? And then what policies and legislation and support will we be able to put in place to actually drive those priorities forward?
Okay, thank you. Sydney?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. My colleague here has talked about 2 or 3 years down the line, and others have a different opinion. It may not be a long time, but the referendum was called and was on the table for quite some time. And you mentioned, David has talked about this inquiry. Did your organisation not look and say, look, what if the vote is to exit the EU? Was there no thought given at any time that if that was the result, we would need to move quickly in regard to funding and in regard to different organisations getting funding, getting it spent by a certain time? Or was that just left in hope we'll get the result that we want and things will be okay?
Maybe if I could answer that. I mean, you have before you the report from IEEP, and that was done for that reason, to identify the pros and cons of Brexit and what would happen thereafter. The challenge that everybody faces now is that even if we go into the EPA, there will be quite a lot of the environmental legislation that would apply, including some of the fisheries legislation, because in terms of EU legislative competence, conservation of marine biological resources is still a regulated function. It's like immigration. Now, there's some flexibility in that you still apply your own common fisheries policy, but a large chunk of that will still be implemented and be part of any agreement, I would guess. So it's going to be a very complex process as we move forward through the negotiations. It's working out what the regulated functions are, what impact does that have in Northern Ireland, what's directives, and where is the flexibility for finding a way forward in terms of meeting our needs.
Thank you.
Just add to that over the past 12 months, since the sort of threat of major government cutbacks in funding for the environmental sector, everybody in the environmental sector has been looking very long and hard at alternative sources of income, and we've identified those that we can. However, for a lot of us, the only other alternatives were European funding so far, and so we are going to have to find other ways of doing that somehow within the United Group.
Thank you very much. And I think just given your response, I think on the question asked, you are further down the road in fact that you have done a paper and have looked at what will happen after Brexit. Some of the people who campaigned to get out of Europe haven't even looked that far. So I think that it would be fairly rich of us to be criticising you here today on what you have done. Harold?
Sure. I'll be adding something. I am from the Kilkee area, so I know a bit about the fishing. And obviously, fishermen felt for so long been over-regulated by EU regulations. In my run-up to election, I heard a lot of farmers again saying too many regulations. So it appears to be, for those who wanted Brexit, who I had met for a month before the election, it was the over-regulation of generally everything. So would it not be a case of that you would nearly need to expect that there could be a sort of reduction in your type of work? For other than that, things is going to remain the same. For those who wanted Brexit, wanting to deregulate it in some ways, but you want to continue on doing exactly what you're doing. So in other words, there's going to be no change.
So if I could maybe pick that up. I mean, I think the issue is that nature is in serious decline. All the evidence points to huge reductions in nature in Northern Ireland and across the UK. So part of that regulation was put in to make sure the environment was protected, because the environment and nature underpins, our economy. It's of huge value to tourism. It's what attracts people to this country, and it's also very important for people's health. It's important for agriculture in itself, pollination, for example. So I think the fact is that was why it was put in place in the first instance. So I think we have to make sure that we're moving to protect the regulation legislation that's there to protect the environment.
If I just could add on that, of course, as we've alluded to in our paper as well, not all legislation you have to follow is EU legislation. There's also international commitments and stuff as well that have to be delivered upon. And I would imagine, because all I can do is guess this stage, and in comes with future legislation, whatever way we design it, especially if we're going to compete for world markets, there may well be, for example, environmental standards or sustainability standards. And I'm only guessing that'll probably be involved in that as well. But certainly, as I said, there's a number of national, EU and international standards that we currently have to meet. So, and most of our national legislation enshrines, enshrines some of those policies and directives at different levels. So it's not just like a simple matter of we don't have to do that anymore. Well, I imagine that's the way it's going to be. Once again, this will all be part of the debate and negotiations.
Thank you. Robin?
Thanks, Chair. Just following on to Sean's part, how much of our, I suppose, environmental regulations are actually governed by EU in comparison to those national and international ones? I'm trying to get how much are we going to lose an awful lot by being out of the EU? Regards to regulations.
This is a very complex issue, because a lot of the legislation has been written to put in place the European directives, but it has included stuff that is of national legislation, if you like. It doesn't necessarily. So you have a bill that went to Parliament. Yes, well, Kyoto is an international agreement through the Convention on Biological Diversity. So that's outside of that. But there are aspects of that are written into legislation that are not part of the EU. So the legislation that we have covering environmental regulation generally has a mixture of EU components and national and international components. So it's going to be quite a complex task to disentangle all of that and work out what is and isn't driven by the EU. That is one of the issues that we raise here, is that this is not just a straightforward sort of going through the rule book and just stroking out.
Yeah, but
certain
Chair, what I was trying to get at was we're not in Patsy's situation to environmental legislation. All that legislation doesn't disappear overnight because we're out of the EU. We're still governed by national and international.
Well, if you take the example of the EU, there's been 200 pieces of legislation, environmental legislation brought through since the 1970s. There's a fair chunk of that will probably have to be transposed into domestic legislation, and that's likely to be part of any trade agreement with the EEA based on the experiences of those countries that are outside the EU but within the EEA, trading within the EEA. But we're not going to know that until we go into negotiations, so there's a lot of uncertainty, but it's huge.
Just to add on that, the all-party group of which some members here were a member of as well, we did just a bit of brief research, I think it was in 2014, and we identified about 30 major directives now, with those European directives, of which there were subsections within those, but it basically was looking at how they're applied in Northern Ireland. And at that stage, I think we managed to get it into a brief summary of it, but all that will have to be looked at again to see, because once again, because those are directives, they be reflected in national and other legislation as well. So that's one of the issues raised, the resources we'll have to put in right across all that sectors in Northern Ireland society into looking at that legislation and now what's it mean.
There is a paper, A Balance of Competences, which is available on the website, which DEFRA had previously prepared some time ago when the discussions kicked off, that would be worth looking at, because it defines exactly what is and isn't EU legislation and what is domestic legislation.
Which website?
It's DEFRA. I'll get it and circulate it to the committee clerk.
That's great, thank you.
Be great, thank you.
Chair.
Morris?
Thank you, Chair. Just really a comment as opposed to a question. I think that the legislation that you have in place at the minute is necessary to keep that place going forward. I think we have to maintain the environment, we have to enhance it, we have to protect it going forward for generations to come. So I think to try and enshrine what legislation you have in place going forward as a priority. That's the four.
Thank you. William?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. One of the bullet points here is, given that the farming industry's reliance on capped payments, a decline in farm payments, Pillar 1, Pillar 2, would have a devastating social, economic and environment impact. Do you not realise that's one of the reasons that many farmers voted to come out of Europe, was because they're taking money away from productive agriculture? And in many cases, a smaller farmer will receive a very, very small payment in 4 years' time. That is one of the reasons that many of those farmers voted to come out of Europe, is because their subsidies from Europe were going to be decreased to such a level that wasn't going to matter to them. And I think that is one of the main reasons why many farmers voted to come out. Plus, they see on top of that their prices are very poor, but I think your reading into that situation is wrong, but I think many smaller farmers, their payment is going to be derived at the end of this period.
I think the concern is that when they recarve up budgets in Westminster, that the same amount of money won't come back to Northern Ireland to be distributed amongst the agricultural industry. That would be the main concern.
I think our fear is that for Westminster, farming, or for the Great Britain, farming is a much lower priority than it would be here in Northern Ireland, and I think therefore there may be less money available. And I think that, as Jennifer says, that would be our concern.
But if there was less money available and it targeted properly, it may still be okay.
There may be serious environmental outcomes that fall out of that, however. We have to wait. I mean, the uncertainty is the issue again here.
Yeah, but the certainty for smaller farmers is the direct payments are getting smaller each year, and they realise that.
Yes.
And I think
I do understand
a strong lobby with their UK government may rectify that, actually. That payments should be made to the smaller and more productive farmer.
Yeah. Time will tell.
Time will tell, oh, absolutely.
We could be sure about it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I'll just remind the member that we didn't vote here in the North to leave, so the majority of farmers possibly voted to stay.
On all opinion polls, a majority of farmers are voting to leave.
Kiva?
So I think it's, I mean, I think it's very important that the public money for agriculture helps with agriculture, but it also helps the environment, because it should be public money for public goods.
Keep in here quickly to ask a question before we finish.
I kind of suppose I'm just coming in the back of what Morris was saying, and in terms of the environmental protection remaining a priority and the regulations remaining in place, we do have, you know, commitments to reduction of greenhouse gases and things like that are already in place. There is a programme for government outcome which is linked to protecting the environment. So I think you should be reassured that there is that commitment there, and I suppose it's a matter of us taking that on board and making sure that there is funding available to keep those types of programmes in place.
So I was going to say, I think that's why it's really important that the indicators in the programme for government are measuring the right thing, because my reading of the situation would be is that funding is likely to follow the things that get measured. I don't think it's complete at the minute. I don't think it covers all the things that it needs to cover to make sure in this post-Brexit era that we do get adequate protection of all aspects of the environment.
And I think just on that, it's very important that we get as much consultation feedback from the likes of yourselves as possible to inform that process.
Maybe one thing that's largely missing in Programme for Government is biodiversity, even though there is a biodiversity strategy which has been signed off by the executive. We've got sustainability, we've got greenhouse gases, but there's really nothing there to address biodiversity.
And again, this is subject to an international agreement that the UK has signed up to, the Convention for Biological Diversity, and so the targets there are very similar to the EU targets, and we still have to honour them because we are signed up as a.
I suppose just in response to that, the programme for government is outcome focused this time, so I think that there's room for manoeuvre in all of those things, because it is going to be about the outcomes, and I think that is where we need to try and focus, that it is going to be. But if things need to be changed or looked at again, I mean, as Keith has already said, if you feed that into us, we would certainly be prepared to look at that. I'm going to thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate you coming along here today.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just reiterate our willingness and keenness to work with you to reach a solution on some of these issues, and we will, we're available at any time to comment or to give our views to you.
Thank you, Pat. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next briefing is from RDC, RCN and Nervin, and I'd like to welcome Lisa Canavan from Rural Development Council, Kate Clifford from Rural Community Network, and Majella Murphy from NI Rural Women's Network. So we're given 5 minutes for the presentation, just to allow members as much time as possible to ask questions. So we're allowing 30 minutes maximum for this part of the fair, and just want to go ahead, I suppose, just from my own point of view. I know that you are probably the group that are most concerned because these are likely to be the group that are going to be most impacted. So you want to go ahead with the presentation, and then we'll allow members to ask questions.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
And yes, we are aware we have the 5 minutes. So we have opted to split the presentation into 3. I'll take the introduction, Kate will take the key issues, and Teresa will provide the summary and the next steps. And these are our initial first thoughts. And we would ask that you would bear that in mind, as we're only just almost a week into Brexit, and that will undoubtedly signify significant change for us. As we make our way through this presentation today, we ask you to think of rural dwellers, individuals, farm families, rural businesses, community groups, social enterprises, and all those who contribute to rural life in this region. We, like the previous group, find ourselves with more questions than answers. I think there's a song in there somewhere. The only certainty we have is that the impact will be significant in our local communities, given that the EU was the instigator and consistent driver of rural development policy and practice for the past 40 years. There has been no substantial dedicated mainstream rural development fund in Northern Ireland. We have relied upon European funding to largely finance rural development initiatives since the early 1990s. Brexit therefore creates fear and concern about the future of rural development. The current rural development programme is worth 630 million in total, with the Rural Development Priority 6 element worth 80 million, of which 80% is Exchequer funded. We would urge this committee to protect this level of funding at a minimum going forward. We would like the current funding level to be ring-fenced and protected for the duration of RDP. We would like the scope of activities currently supported in line with identified need by rural communities to be sustained. We need assurance that rural development as a policy priority for this committee and the Executive doesn't fall off the agenda.
The issues and challenges presented within the paper that our position paper, which was written before Brexit, remain. They're crucial regardless of the Brexit context. And as 3 agencies working collaboratively, we remain committed to securing a fair share for rural communities. In the context of Brexit, we recognise the following issues. Many groups and rural communities are currently in receipt of EU funding such as ESF and EARDF. We now need clarity about the EU intention for this funding while the UK is still in the Brexit process. For 20 years, the government have invested in a strong rural community voluntary sector. What protection can you make to that investment, particularly as EU funding withdraws and other measures are negotiated and agreed? We believe that there's likely to be an adverse impact on farms, farm families and rural dwellers, meaning that now, more than ever, they will rely on infrastructure support services from the community and voluntary sector. We need to continue investing in tackling rural poverty and social isolation, but not at the expense of the Rural Development Programme, but complementary to any future funding secured. The TRIPSI programme is already limited, particularly this time by being largely capital focused, but much is needed. The budget of 3 to 4 million per year is key in addressing rural poverty and disadvantage. How now will this Executive ring-fence similar investment in the future, given the compounded effects of Brexit, austerity and welfare reform on incomes for farm families and rural dwellers? Our fear is that TRIPSI will be viewed as an adequate replacement for the Rural Development Programme, and given the scale of the RDP monies coming in, TRIPSI doesn't even come close. How will this committee ensure that the Executive protects the interests of rural development policy and practice in future years? The programme for government clearly states an agreed need for a strong, competitive, regionally based economy. We believe that rural development can support the delivery of that ambition. Can you, as a committee, commit to ensuring that rural development has adequate resource to achieve this regional balance in the future? As 3 agencies absolutely concerned with social justice issues, we would like assurances that the hard-won social and human rights law enshrined in EU policy and law are protected in a new structure. It is imperative that the EU protection afforded to the citizens of Northern Ireland, particularly those most vulnerable, continue unbroken and unchanged as Brexit unfolds. In the absence of an EU policy driver, we would recommend urgent development of a Bill of Rights for Northern Ireland as set out in the Good Friday Agreement. As you can see, the challenges presented by Brexit for rural people and communities are many and they're complex.
In summary then, we would ask for a clear rural development policy for Northern Ireland that fully supports vibrant, sustainable rural communities in the absence of any future EU policy driver. We believe the need to invest in rural development and rural communities exists regardless of Brexit. The issues, needs and challenges will not go away but could be further compounded by uncertainty and reduced funding. With the development of a strong, locally driven and funded rural policy, we believe the Executive can continue to unlock the potential of rural assets. Opportunity does exist to align rural needs to the ambitions of the new programme for government, and something we have tried to do and demonstrate in our paper that we circulated. We need assurances that the Executive will work collectively and in the best interests of rural and rural development during the negotiations phase. We wholly support the need to protect the agri-food and farming sectors, but stress this cannot be at the expense of rural development. Rural areas are home to 40% of the Northern Ireland population, which is not insignificant and therefore cannot be ignored. We need to ensure that rural areas remain places where people can live and work. In this context, we need to ensure that funding for rural development is protected, that rural development does not become the casualty, nor do we go back to a situation where it becomes farming versus rural development. We need to protect the investment for all. In terms of the next steps, we believe early discussions are necessary and early decisions across the Executive to secure the immediate future of the rural economy. We urge ministers and MLAs to ensure the needs of rural dwellers are at the forefront of their minds as they enter post-referendum negotiations. We believe the recently approved Rural Needs Act can help support this. We would ask for clarity on stability around the current EU Rural Development Programme and assurances that funds will not be reduced. I suppose we need to reassure our farmers, businesses and communities and local action groups that the current programme will roll out as planned. We need to engage in early planning around how this may exit and what shape a new non-EU funded rural development programme would take or what it would look like. I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the significant benefits the Rural Development Programme can bring to the wider rural economy in terms of job creation, access to services, rural tourism and village renewal. I think you only have to look to the last programme to realise that there was over 6,000 applications for funding. That is significant and shows a huge demand. 1,800 projects, just over that, were supported. 1,200 jobs were created. 447 rural micro-enterprises were established. 257 rural villages and settlements benefited. And I suppose our priority is to ensure the continuation of rural development programme in some guise post-Brexit. That includes supporting farmers, but also importantly continues support for the wider rural economy and communities. We can't afford rural areas to fall into further decline or disadvantage because of Brexit. We also think there's value in looking at working groups to establish implications across the sector. We would include obviously rural development within that. There's agri-environment has been mentioned in farming. We would include rural development in terms of working groups. What will be the impact? What might rural development look like? And how can we shape a positive outcome? As a sector, we welcome the opportunity to feed in constructively, and we will work with this committee, the Minister, the Department and the Executive in general. We recognise that rural cuts across all government priorities, and it's imperative that it doesn't fall between stools. We believe the Rural Needs Act can support this. However, rural affairs and the Rural Development Programme remain part of DERA, and we need assurance that a policy for rural development will be developed and resourced. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all three of you, for your presentation. My first question is going to be the same as it was to the previous presenters. Has the Minister contacted you in order to have any discussions, to give you any reassurance, or to even find out what it is that you need from her in terms of going into negotiations? Because I think you're the people that she needs to be sticking to before she goes into any negotiation.
Oh, we've been in touch with the Minister and we're waiting a date for a meeting, so yes, we would hope that that will happen soon.
Okay, well that's good. And obviously, I mean, my constituency is Mid-Ulster, so I'm well aware of the benefits of the Rural Development Programme and how much it means to any area. But it had a massive impact in Mid-Ulster because we're such a large rural constituency, and you know it spans a massive area, and it really has been a massive benefit. So you certainly don't need to make the case to me, and I'm sure a lot of our members are in the same position. But I'd just like to give them an opportunity now to ask questions. We're asking that questions are kept brief and responses the same, just so that we get through as much as possible. William?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In relation to, I know you understand you have some concerns around rural development and the fact of how it made impact on farmers and small farmers. But surely Europe's decision to go flat rate on their basic farm payment, to go flat rate, has had a bigger impact and will have a bigger impact on small farms than any other decision that will be made. I know one small farmer told me currently has 20,000 of a single farm payment. When it goes flat rate, he'll have £500. There's 19,500 that small farmer's losing. He's not in many cases, there's farmers that produce a considerable amount of food, but they're small landowners. And my view on this is that actually Europe's decision to go flat rate, go flat rate with their basic farm payments, is going to have a bigger impact than anything else that will happen.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in response to that, I would say that makes it even more important to have a rural development policy that addresses how you can make small farmers viable. I mean, we're going to have to look at farm diversification options. You know, if there are implications of this in terms of the viability of small farms, rural development becomes even more important. And I think from our perspective, that's what we need to see, a vision for rural areas which incorporates all aspects of the rural economy, but most importantly addresses where there are issues of viability in small farms. And you know, rural development is going to be at the cornerstone of that, and I think that's what we would like to see moving forward. And if that's the opportunity that this presents, then we'll welcome that.
Thank you. Patsy?
All right, thanks, Chair, and thank you for coming along. And probably most of us know that a Brexit won't affect world prices of milk or beef. And picking up on the point that you made there, Teresa, it has been portrayed to us, and indeed the department has represented to us the importance of the Rural Development Programme. Now, can I ask just to give us a figure of what that means currently to yourselves there? And also last night there was a meeting where a number of representatives expressed concern about the uncertainty of the LAGs, the local action groups, and their importance to local rural communities. So I presume you're picking up on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in reality, I mean, the Rural Development Programme in terms of the local action groups and support for the wider rural economy is worth 80 million. So that's a substantial amount of money. 70 million goes through the local action group structures, and there's 10 million into rural tourism. So that is a substantial investment. In terms of
over what period is that?
That's over the programme period to 2020. Right. Yeah. In terms of, I suppose, our organisations, the Rural Development Council that I obviously work for has secured contracts within the Rural Development Programme, so there is implications for us as an organisation. We secured a contract in relation to the Rural Network, which is a function or a support unit which helps support the delivery of the programme, and obviously there could be future implications in terms of that source of funding for us moving forward.
And how many people are involved?
I suppose we have 16 staff. Not all of them are fully funded through European programmes, but the vast majority of them are. So you would be talking, we also secure European Northern Periphery monies. So when you look at that, you're probably talking in the region of 10 to 12 staff that have some support from an EU programme.
On top of that, I think, Patsy, there's another issue, which is a broader issue around the LAGs, which is that they lever in other money. So where European money is brought in, the investment from, say, NIHE is match funding, or match funding coming in from PHA, the Public Health Service as well. All of that supports rural development and rural economy. So it's the leverage that it brings in. It's not just the work of the LAGs as in the delivery of the Rural Development Programme, but it's also the leverage that it brings into the rural economy. It's also the connections and the networking that comes along with people in a locality coming together to design a future for their area. Mid-Ulster being a prime example, where there are 2,000 members of that LAG who come together on a regular basis, who are networked, who begin to become interdependent. And it's that interdependence, I think, that is at risk if the Rural Development Programme goes down and there isn't something to replace it. And that's where we need to be really creative about what will replace the Rural Development Programme as we move into Brexit.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
I have two questions and they're kind of interlinked. I would have a lot of concerns for what it will mean for the rural women's groups in particular, but also in terms of, we already know that there is high incidence of suicide among rural dwellers, particularly farmers. And I'm just wondering, I know that there were a number of programmes through the Rural Development Programme, you know, there was support where maybe two departments, health and rural development, worked together, and that meant that support was able to go out there and support those people. And I would have some major concerns, because uncertainty will always feed into that, and this is probably a time when there needs to be an even greater focus on that.
I think we have to do an awful lot of work around planning for the future now, and to seize, I mean, there are opportunities from this as well, but there are also opportunities for rural, and with the Rural Needs Act in particular, to ask other departments to step up to take account of rural affairs. And to work with that, I mean, we talked about the infrastructure that has been created on the ground over the last 20 years. This department has made a huge investment in rural community groups. Those community groups have fantastic capacity, fantastic facilities. That now needs to be capitalised on to make sure that whatever Brexit strategy happens and whatever disinvestment happens, that rural areas are, we capitalise on the investment that has been made over the years to really bring back that investment into communities and to do cross-cutting themes and interdepartmental working. The Rural Needs Act will give a basis for that, and we're very grateful that that is in place before Brexit happened. But it will be a matter of calling other departments to account, and we would hope for the support of this committee in doing that, to make sure that rural areas don't lose out, and that as farm incomes and the uncertainty and the challenges that come ahead with this, because it's people's livelihoods, people's homes. Farming is a very different industry to other types of industry in that it is people's livelihoods and homes. And as that happens, we need to have assurance that the proper support infrastructure is in place to support people through the change and the challenge ahead.
And if I might just add to that as well, sorry, just in relation to the TRIPSI programme, the Tackling Rural Poverty and Social Isolation, which is not EU funded, it's funded through government. I think we do need to see a continued and sustained need for that, particularly in relation to types of projects that you're mentioning, Linda, around mental health and access to services. I think TRIPSI also offers an opportunity, and we need to ensure that that is continued and sustained throughout all of these discussions and negotiations.
If I could come in on the rural women's groups. The rural women's groups, and NERBL works closely with them, the rural women's sector is woefully underfunded, woefully, and has been. And this was identified as far back as 2005, when there was identified there was a need for a rural women's infrastructure.
Take it away.
And there was money put in then by the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. That funding has been significantly cut as we went on down the line. Now we're looking at 2 part-time workers. It's myself and my colleague, and we work across rural Northern Ireland as best we can, and we deliver services to those groups. We deliver support, we work on the policies, we gender-proof, we rural-proof. The stark stats are 98.7% of government funding for the women's sector goes to urban groups. 1.3% goes to rural. Now that is just, it's not fair, it's not a level playing field. We need to build up the sector rather than pull the rug out from under it. The women are the backbone of rural society. If you look at Cullaville Women's Group, that group over there have worked with the LAG. They have access funding through the last rural development programme for a new community centre there. That's 12 women that are doing that work. Most of our community groups are run by women. Now, I'm not taking away from the men, but most of the women are doing the work.
Thank you, appreciate that. Sydney?
Well, thank you, Chair. I don't know how I could follow that.
Carefully.
Carefully, Sydney. Thank you, Therese, for coming along today. It's good to see you again, Therese. You're very welcome. I've been a rural dweller all my life, and I've served, as you know, on many rural organisations, including RDC. So suffered many good meetings there. But you know, going forward, we have 40% of a rural population here, and no matter what is done or what's going forward after Brexit, that there certainly has to be that engagement, and certainly working with the rural people and to promote rural. For many aspects. There is this great word coming out today from the very first presentation this morning, is uncertainty, and that's where we are, is uncertainty. But I still come back, and the word I would use today is opportunity. And I believe there's great opportunities, and for rural people as well as we go forward. But it will be a number of people, and I'm sure people like yourselves have found this. But what I will ask here is, you're talking about working with the politicians, ML, but I think local councils and things will also feed into this greatly, and I think maybe more engagement with them. You're meeting the minister, you've asked for a meeting, but will you be working through the local councils and trying to see what their vision is following on from this decision to leave the EU?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if I can just address a couple of points there in relation to uncertainty. I think for us the uncertainty is the immediate. What happens with the current rural development programme? Will it roll out as planned? Will it last to 2020? And I think that does give a bit of time. If we understand what's happening with the current rural development programme, that might create a bit of stability, and I think that's what we need, and that's what we're trying to articulate. We are working with a large rural population, and I think there's 2 ways of looking at this. We either stand to lose out or we stand to benefit. We're on the side of benefit. We want to be assured that there will be a policy put in place that looks at how rural development moves forward and how the people in rural Northern Ireland can be addressed post-Brexit. So those, in answer to those 2 questions, I think the other thing about working with local councils, we all work with local councils quite well. Community planning, again, we believe that's a huge opportunity. But again, councils need to be resourced. They need to be resourced in terms of looking at how they address the rural needs within their constituents. If you take the rural development programme out of councils, that's a big amount of money. So we need to look at what will replace that. And we obviously want to work closely with councils. We think community planning, the programme for government, if we can tie all that together, there is huge opportunities. But I think you can't get away from the fact that rural development historically has been a EU-funded programme, and that creates huge concern for us if that can't be replaced. And that's just where we're at.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And having just come out of council, I can tell you that we did rely heavily, and we're very happy that the money come before this happened.
Yeah.
I suppose just from our own point of view, I did ask the question in the Chamber the other day in terms of the Rural Development Fund and whether it would be there up until 2020, and to say that we could give you any assurance here today, I certainly not from the response could say that I could give you an absolute assurance. It is certainly something that I will be pursuing, and I'm sure we as a committee will pursue with the Minister, that it's vital, and that it's something that in terms of any negotiations certainly needs to be, you know, prioritised. But I wouldn't have taken any solace from the response in the Chamber, and that's just been perfectly straight about it. So I'm going to finish with the presentation if everybody's happy enough. And thank you very much.
Could we just say that the priorities that we've listed within the paper that we submitted pre-Brexit still stand, very much so, and we would welcome an opportunity to sit with you and work out what would happen about a rural development policy for Northern Ireland and how that might be configured that will allow for balanced regional development in the future, because we think that's absolutely essential, and particularly more so if we're on the periphery. Again, you know, if our border areas are on the periphery of Northern Ireland and our rural areas are on the periphery of Belfast, we need a balanced regional development, and we would relish an opportunity to sit with you and work out what a rural development policy for Northern Ireland really could be.
I have to say, I'm sure that the other members will agree. We would be more than happy to do that. The reason we wanted to get you in to do a briefing, and we have all the organisations, even before Brexit, was we planned to have a strategic planning day, and we needed to know what your priorities were so that we could be prioritising the right things. So if you can have that reassurance that your priorities are what are going to be this committee's priorities, you know, that's why we wanted to know what the priorities of all the different groups are, so that we can make sure the things that we're prioritising are what actually matter to the different organisations and groups, not what we personally believe. We need evidence-based, okay? Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay, our final briefing then today is going to be from the department, Dara, and there aren't any papers for this item. Obviously it was added on quite late, so we wouldn't have expected it to be.
Yeah.
Welcome Noel Lavery, your Permanent Secretary, Louise Ward-Hunter, Deputy Secretary, David Small, Deputy Secretary, and Robert Huey, Deputy Secretary. We're going to ask you to keep the presentation to 10 minutes. It may even be shorter.
Shorter.
I thought it might. And so I know, Noel, that you have to leave at 12:30, and that's fine. And we may well have food by then, but I'm not sure that we will have in terms of questions. So if you want to go ahead, and again I'm saying to the members to keep their questions brief, that it's one question per member, just so to give as many people an opportunity as possible to get in and ask questions, because I know there will be a lot of questions for the department in terms of Brexit. Okay.
Chair, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. Members will be aware of many policies, functions, delivery activities and funding the department is responsible for that derives from the EU, whether it be legislative requirements around CAP, Common Fisheries Policy, rural development, animal and plant health, environmental legislation and protection. So a very significant decision for stakeholders. A team with me who you can see. Others are available in the public gallery if issues arise, just to make the information available to the committee. Short opening remarks, Chair, and happy to take questions as discussed. Sure, members will be aware of the widely reported timescale based on triggering Article 50. If we assume that happens this year, then the negotiation process is 2 years. UK Government will lead on the negotiations with the EU, both in terms of UK exit and in terms of any future relationship. Within the UK, there will be negotiations between central government, Westminster and the devolved administrations on how the impacts are managed and how resources are allocated. And note that the First Minister said on Thursday the priority of the Executive will be to ensure Northern Ireland's interests are protected and advanced, and new opportunities are developed as part of any new arrangements within the UK, ROI, as well with our European neighbours. The forthcoming negotiations will be our focus. My Minister is on the record as saying she and her executive colleagues will work closely with Whitehall and, in our case, DEFRA, in the coming weeks and months. Chair, it's obviously early days. We're 6 days after the referendum decision. Considerable number of unknowns yet around the negotiation process, how it will be managed. We want to stress we are very much operating in terms of our functions as business as usual, in terms of our immediate business. We are progressing with a full range of functions as normal. And that said, as we expect, we've put in place our own internal arrangements to manage this situation. A time scale for negotiations allows for a degree of stability within the department. We consider the policies that need to be developed and implemented that will be better tailored to local needs. At the centre of government, there's an overarching team which has been established, will be established and with representatives from each department. Louise will be our representative on that team. Within our department, as I said, I'm leading a team comprising of most senior colleagues. Our focus will be on scoping the implications for the department's functions, heads of groups leading in their business areas, number of strands we've developed and themes, and I'll say a little bit more now about that. Obviously, we need to review all our legislation. The department currently operates under that derives from EU directives, regulations, assessing the scale of the legislative change that may be required. Joe Castles, who's here today, will be leading on that. We're assessing the implications for trade to our other member states, including the South. Our agri-food sector depends heavily on its export markets, as committee is aware, and illustrate that issue. 73% of our agri-food and drinks processing sector sales were destinations outside Northern Ireland. Robert will be leading on this element. Obviously, there's the financial implications. Total level of direct payments to farmers in 2015 was estimated at 287 million, taking into account all of the schemes. Graham Wilkinson will be leading on that. The European Maritime and Fisheries Fund has a contribution of approximately 10 million from the EU. That David will be covering that. RDP, Chair, is worth approximately 623 million, due to be funded with a contribution from the EU of 186 million. As well as that, we draw down Horizon 2020. So we'll be assessing a full range of financial implications, and we'll assess our current EU schemes and investments, and obviously there's issues like if there's impending fraction proceedings, levels of disallowance, etc. But can I emphasise what the Minister said in the Assembly this week? We are continuing to roll out the RDP and to deliver payments. We'll continue to authorise, execute and account for payments, and of course apply the regulations and ensure robust governance structures and procedures are in place. And we remain committed to the financial plans that were approved and agreed by the Executive, including the RDP and the 623 million. The financial consequences of the EU will need to be negotiated, and this will take years, and we can't put our plans on hold. So we're running forward our plans, and we'll see what happens in the negotiations. Earlier this week, the Minister met with agri-food industry representatives, and we will work closely with the industry, and that will be part of the structures that we'll put in place. And also, we'll be working with our stakeholders across the piece, with fishery, forestry, rural and environmental stakeholders, some of whom you've met this morning. Chair, I think I'll stop there, conscious of time, and happy to take questions.
You've already answered one of mine, because I didn't get as clear an answer from the Minister in the Chamber in terms of whether RDP would run right through to 2020, and I'm assuming from what you're saying that is
Well,
Regardless of-
what I've said is the RDP will continue to run. I've no idea, what will happen between now and 2020. But the RDP will continue to run. I mean, Chair, if I could quote what the Finance Minister said, SEUPB, having received guidance from the Northern Ireland Finance Minister on the implications, it's what SEUPB said, on the implications of the recent referendum decision, which the majority of North would remain, will continue to implement the delivery of Peace 4 and Interreg 5A. Okay? So the key thing is Peace 4 and Interreg 5A are being delivered. It is anticipated that all EU programmes will form part of the discussions to take place. But we're continuing to implement our programmes until there's any change in that's affected by the negotiations. So I can't say what will happen to 2020, but we are continuing to implement our programmes on that basis.
Okay, so we don't have any assurance then?
Well, all I can't say what's going to happen in the next 2-3 years, but the Executive committed to an RDP. We're continuing to implement an RDP, and that's where we are as today, and I want to give the committee that assurance. And I think the Minister indicated that in the Assembly, I think.
She said we are continuing to,
Yeah.
and today we are, and tomorrow possibly, and next week. But my concern is for further. I don't want to dwell on, and other members want in, so I don't want to be taking up other people's time as well. Just in terms of then the cap spending up to 2020, that there was persistence, reassurance given during the Leave campaign that would still be financed, and I'm just wondering how that reassurance was able to be given, or have you been given a reassurance? Has the department been given a reassurance that will absolutely be the case?
Well, I mean, sure, it's the same answer as I've just given. We're planning to continue to implement cap payments. The future of agricultural support will, if we're outside the EU, will depend on what the future UK policy is and how that's devolved down to Northern Ireland. So that's all as part of the negotiation. What I can give you an assurance is that I'm in contact with my counterpart in DEFRA and that we will be involved in those discussions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think it just highlights the fact that all the guarantees that were given by the Leave campaign were just like the 325 million or whatever that was going to go to health. It was an illusion. Patsy?
All right, Chair, thank you. And just to emphasise that, the point is you're very assertive in saying that the funding will continue to be implemented for the RDP. I presume that's with the caveat as long as that funding exists.
Well,
you can't say anything else.
No, let me just sort of take a step back from it, Mr. McGlone. So we have a rural development programme for 623 million, of which 186 is EU funding. For instance, the Farm Business Improvement Scheme is all national funding. That will continue to when it's rolled out. That will continue. That's not dependent on RDP. If you take the rest of it, that is a programme agreed by the EU, which is part national and part EU funding. So, as part of the negotiations, there'll be how do those programmes continue, whatever the Brexit date is. Those discussions will be, UK-wide, same issues for Scotland, Wales, for England, and we'll deal with whatever the settlement on those is. We can't see the future now. I just wanted to give the reassurance that people who are entering into contracts, we're continuing to do that. People are looking at investment. We don't want to have a break in investment decisions in terms of where we are now, because we want to do the best for Northern Ireland. So as of today, we still have an RDP. What the future holds, we'll see. We're still planning on that basis.
You're taking me into interesting territory here. If we could just explore this, Chair, with if people are entering into contracts, what advice is the department giving then in terms of time-based for those contracts?
We're continuing to issue the letters of offer as we did, and we'll take guidance.
Sorry, you may be picking me up wrong. Say, for example, the contract is for 2, 3, 4, 5 years of a project. It has come up here today already. What advice would the department then be giving to those organisations or firms or companies around the time base of that argument?
Well, I mean, we could even get into forestry where the contracts are 10 years.
Yes.
You know, government's entering into a commitment. There will be guidance which will come out from the UK about how we're going to deal with those issues. At the minute, we're continuing to issue contracts, and government will meet its obligations.
The best.
Okay.
Sorry,
That's it.
1 week clarity.
We will try to come back to you because
Could you tell me you've
No,
entered
Patsy,
in?
we will come back to
sorry,
you. I'm
Chair.
sorry.
Right, okay, right.
I think to be fair to other people, Dave.
Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say thank you, Noel, for coming with the team representing the whole department, all three key elements, which I think has been very valuable. In that specific context, you listed a number of people and their responsibilities. You did it fairly rapidly. It would be quite useful to have a piece of paper.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say what that is. I'm not asking for any more detail now.
Sorry, Mr. Ford, can I just say my apologies that Norman Fulton isn't here today. He's not available. He's on holiday.
Everybody else in the department is.
Yes.
I've got in front of me a briefing on Wales and the EU, what the vote to leave means. Is there any similar work done? I mean, it, for example, highlights the effects on agriculture, fisheries and the environment in Wales. Is there anything similar within the department which can be shared at the moment? And specifically, given the conversation we've just had around EU directives and where they relate to domestic law, is there any document anywhere which says what has actually been transposed into domestic law and what simply remains as EU directive?
I'm not aware that we currently have such a document, but that's the work that we have now commissioned. So we're looking at. I mean, some of it is EU directive. Some of our legislation is based directly on the regulation, and obviously, if you're outside the EU, the regulation falls. So we're doing an audit of all of that and what the implications are right across the different areas of the business.
Can I ask what the timescale might be to produce that?
Well, we'll produce it over the next couple of months.
Very significant. Very significant.
I mean, I know you've already heard some evidence already today on that. It's very significant right across. Obviously, I mean, this is right across the UK. This is a very significant issue, and no doubt at some stage, Chair will talk about resourcing implications and staffing implications. So it will have very significant implications. But you're quite right. Let's look at what the legislative base is, what will need to, what legislation will fall, and then we'll get into what's going to be done at a UK and Northern Ireland level. Yeah.
Thank you, David. William?
Thank you, Chair. We're told that it will take possibly 2, 3 and possibly even more years to exit Europe. Do you anticipate that in the meantime agreements that are already with Europe in regarding to rural development and basic farm payment, do you believe that they will continue to we actually accept, we actually leave Europe? Do you believe that existing agreements with Europe would naturally stay in place till we actually leave Europe? I would have thought.
Absolutely, yes. Sorry, that was a point I was trying to make earlier. Maybe I wasn't clear. Yeah.
Yes, okay. Another question. What's the biggest challenge for your department in relation to all of it?
I think a couple of points just like that. It's obviously a very significant challenge for us all. There are clearly administrative challenges, creating a lot of new policies. You have staffing implications, what new payments systems are. That's internal to a department. We're testing all our current plans and strategic plans against this. There are plenty of opportunities as we look at what is the future, what is for the best of Northern Ireland. I would, however, say, where there's plenty of challenges, we need to be absolutely close to the industry as we work our way through this. Processors, primary producers, and need to work through there to make sure it's, at the end of the day, we're delivering public services. We're doing environmental regulation. So while there's internal, the challenges are also external.
Robin?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Noel. No, maybe a very specific. You said you met the agri-food industry earlier the week. The Ballybuffet plant for processing poultry litter is now funded by the Northern Ireland Executive to the tune of 9.3 million. We'll be sitting in an EU country when we're not in an EU country what steps are being taken, or what are you looking at that differential funding, and also to the transport of poultry waste across the EU border?
I mean, obviously, I haven't done anything particularly in that situation, Mr. Swan. You know, these cross-border trade waste issues are things we'll have to look at.
This is cross-border NI, exactly.
Yeah, no, well, absolutely, and I understand that. We have to look at all these issues. I mean, Invest NI will have some similar issues. There'll be issues across trade and cross-border. What I would say is I have arranged to meet with my counterpart in the south to go across all the range of all the issues we're facing.
Sorry, Chair, just for a quick mention, surely it doesn't matter what your counterpart in the south says if Brussels says something different.
Well, I'm just saying, I think we need to work with our counterparts in the south to see what all the cross-border issues are and to work our way through them.
Okay, Edwin?
Yeah, in terms of the scheme that we talked about in the last term, quite a lot and still hasn't been rolled out for the grant scheme for the farming community. I assume that that's still on board, and how does Brexit affect it? Is it liable for European funding?
No, as I indicated earlier, the Farm Business Improvement Scheme is purely national funding, and I think the Minister said in the House she was intending to make an announcement on that very soon, but it should not have implications directly on that scheme.
Okay. In terms of, that's the question of the Farmers Union, there's been a lot of regulation that has been imposed over the course of the last number of years, which has very limited and perhaps zero environmental benefit, but causes considerable hardship and difficulties. Will the department be looking post-Brexit era how it can ensure that our farms are as efficient as possible and reduce the need for a lot of the supervision that doesn't bring real added benefit to the environment?
I'll bring David in, but if I can give you an overarching answer on that, Mr. Poots. We'll have, as part of this, we'll have to look at what is to the maximum benefit of Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland farming community and the Northern Ireland environment. And so let me give you an assurance. The answer is yes, we will absolutely be doing that. We will have our obligations. Again, there'll be what will be dealt with at a UK basis and what will be dealt with at a Northern Ireland basis. A lot of our legislation on environment is EU based, isn't that true? Yeah. And you know, as the Minister has said, she wants to grow the agri-food industry. And I mean, if you look at what the programme for government says, is to protect and improve the environment, and I would say that will be the same aim. In terms of how that's done, I take the tenor of your question, it will be at a UK and Northern Ireland level. Obviously, there'll be a link into, you know, whatever is done elsewhere. David, have you other comments?
No, just, I mean, I agree that much of what we do is based on EU directive and the EU regulation and legislation. But actually, a lot of the environmental programmes that we deliver and some of the environmental regulation that we deliver is done because we believe it's also the right thing to do. If you take, for example, you know, the Larne oil spill within the last month or so, you know, that's something we would still want to have regulatory frameworks in place to try and avoid. We would want to continue our work to reduce and prevent, if we can, environmental crime. That's something that I think we will still consider is an important area of work, and we want to continue doing that. And we would want to, you know, as far as possible, prevent pollution incidents where we can do it. So I think in a situation where, you know, we had more freedom to decide our environmental policy and the focus of our approach, there are still things that we feel will be appropriate to deliver. And I think, Edwin, in terms of your question, in doing that, you know, we would want to ensure that the regulation we put in place, the programmes we have in place, are proportionate and appropriate.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oliver?
Yes, thanks for your presentation. The EU and Maine regulated the imports into here, the imports of cheap beef. How are we now going to take that forward when we are out of Europe? We have to find other markets. How are we going to regulate cheap meat, cheap produce coming into the country now? How is that going to protect the farmer? And quickly on that there, with such a disparity in the single farm payment going into the flat rate, that if we are going to have negotiations with the English government to get the best deal for our farmer, where is, or have we got a baseline that we won't accept anything lower? And I think we must have that going in. And have we thought of that yet?
Do you want to deal with the first one and I'll come back on the second?
If we're outside of Europe, currently what happens is that Europe ensures that a third country such as Brazil that was sending product into Northern Ireland maintains EU standards, and they send out audit groups in order to ensure all of Europe that that particular country is maintaining the standards that are required by an EU farmer and EU processor. So they go and they do an end-to-end audit of a beef production system in Brazil in order to reassure the Commission that Brazil, for example, is reaching its obligations. The simple answer, if we're outside Europe, then the UK would have to do those checks itself. An agreement would be in place, a bilateral, between a third country and the UK, and the UK would then, under WTO rules, have to carry out those audits itself.
We wouldn't have a say in what comes in here. It's down to Britain then would decide what comes in their negotiation.
The negotiation will be on a UK basis, and it'll be the UK then that'll be setting under WTO rules standards to be imported, and that'll be the subject of a negotiation.
Sorry, just on the payments. I mean, you're quite right. We've done very well in terms of payments. I mean, that'll all be part of the negotiation, and it's something my Minister, I think, has already made clear. And I'd go back to what the First Minister said, to ensure that our interests are protected and advanced. But that will all be part of a negotiation. I mean, but you're quite right. We currently get 9% of the. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong here. 9%, whereas a Barnett consequential, I think, would be 3%.
But very, very quickly, Chair, why I'm raising that question is that if we get to negotiations, we could piece the top. If we get to negotiations here to look at the new formula, we've got to take into consideration the hill farmer as against the lowland farmer, because if we go in under production, the hill farmer will be at a distinct disadvantage if we don't have that disparity made very, very clear to start. The hill man has got to be treated equally with lowland. There can't be any difference in negotiation.
Well, I mean, you're taking me deep into policy there, Mr. McMullen. It would be, I mean, before we even get there, I think there's a review of mid-term review of CAP, who could make whatever changes are made in the EU. We then will look at whatever is the best, and as the Minister said, whatever is the best for Northern Ireland agriculture, and that will be what her negotiating position is. I mean, we want to design the policies and processes that will deliver the best for Northern Ireland agriculture. I just want to keep saying that and emphasise it in this new environment. I understand the point you're making about the special circumstances. I mean, there are a lot of circumstances in Northern Ireland that are quite different from other parts of the UK. Absolutely accept that, but that will be the Minister's point. Get the best deal for Northern Ireland.
Thank you.
Just and going back to what's the best, obviously, for here. The Minister had a statement out this week around free trade, North and South, and I accept that it's not totally free trade as it stands at the minute. But in reality, you know, what is the possibility or probability of that in terms of an EU border?
The future's an unknown place, Chair. We know the importance of trade into EU. I have figures here. 22% of Northern Ireland food and drink goes to ROI, 15% the rest of the EU. But I think that one we're most concerned about is the trade north-south across that border. Nearly every commodity that you think about has significant north-south trade. And even down into sectors such as the mushroom industry, where a lot of the compost is made in the north, a lot of the mushroom production is in the south. Even down to that, you know, before you go to the level that a third to half of the pigs that are slaughtered in Northern Ireland come from the south, about half the lambs go down south to be slaughtered. There's a lot of movement back and forward of primary production, and never mind when you get down into product. And of course, 20% or so of the milk. So it's a very big issue. The issue of what the agreement will end up being will no doubt be a compromise. And the amount of free trade that will remain is, as I say, an entirely unknown sector. And it depends, you know, where we come in the negotiation. When you talk about trade, agriculture, of course, is only one sector, a very important one here in Northern Ireland, but only one sector. And this will be a UK negotiation. And, you know, that's where a lot of the concentration has to be in trying to work out, you know, and trying to ensure that agriculture gets its say within the overall negotiation. And it's got to be said that if you look at precedent that has been set in the past, you know, agriculture has generally fared badly in free trade agreements. You know, Norway part of the EEA, but agriculture is excluded. You know, and a lot of the world trade agreements that work out, agriculture is seen as a very difficult issue, and it's a very difficult issue in this negotiation. But I'm just laying out the challenges. That doesn't mean that we can't come out of this with an arrangement that is beneficial to agriculture on this island, and particularly here in the north. But it's all to be played for, and it really is. It'll be 2.5 years, 2 years at least, before we can see where we're going. The important thing and the reassuring thing that we must keep in mind is that the agreements that we have in place at the moment, they stand until the treaty falls. And that's important to maintain the confidence in the markets that we have out there. Because both in the interest of the agreements we have and those that might be close, or those agreements that companies are thinking of entering into, we can't stand still. We can't have a hiatus. You know, trade must continue up until then. So it's important that I repeat that the arrangements we have, the treaties we have, the agreements we have with third countries and with the EU, that all remains until the treaty falls.
Just a very quick point. Has the Minister met yet with her counterpart in Leinster House?
There's an NSMC meeting on Monday.
On the edge of that, sorry. Apologies for that. Okay, Sydney.
Right, thank you, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. I think you did touch on all the... You've had maybe meetings with the Department with DEFRA?
Been in contact with DEFRA.
Been in contact with DEFRA. Well, what level of engagement would you hope to have with DEFRA, and how intense will that be going into the future?
Well,
when you consider, and maybe try and pin you down your priority, we've talked about a lot of issues here this morning.
Yeah.
But what would be your key priorities as we move towards the exit, say, over the next 2, 3, 4 years?
Well, a couple of things. First Deputy Minister has spoken with the Prime Minister to make sure Northern Ireland's properly represented, and the civil service, you know, and coming out from Whitehall, or putting mechanisms in place to ensure we are. DEFRA's in the lead in our area. You know, I'll be making clear to my counterpart that we want to be fed into that. There's various elements of that. Robert already has a very close working relationship with the CVO on trade, on Norman Fulton's area, in the whole relationship on CAP. We already have a very close working relationship. David's side will be on the environment side. But so I don't want you to think, you know, we're starting from a sort of like we've never spoken to these people. You know what I mean? You know, we already have a very, close working relationship. And if you ever get involved in the EU councils, you're working through that with on the agriculture side with colleagues. So priorities, trade, Trade, obviously a massive priority. If you watch everything in the news about at the minute, it's trade. Support regime and the funding of agriculture and agricultural support. Then policies around environmental protection and fisheries. I mean, that's as I go across the piece in direct answer to your question today, those are the issues.
It will be key to engage very much so with DEFRA and
yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Ensure that we're in there.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what the Minister said.
Yeah.
And you asked, I think, will the engagement be intense? I think yes,
very
intense. Likely to be very intense. Yeah.
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 Okay, just whenever RCN or DP and Nirvan presented to us, they had said that one of their priorities really in terms of the negotiations would be a rural policy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, is that something that is a priority for the department? Is that something that you would see as being a priority going into negotiations?
Well, we are the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, so absolutely. I don't mean to be facetious, sir, but yes, and the Minister has, already said these are her priorities. So yes, I mean, we need to look at how we fund all of our programmes going forward. If you look at our business plan and we're already working through our strategic plan, all elements of agriculture, environment and rural affairs are there and are tested. While this is a massive issue for us, those policies and what are best for Northern Ireland continue. So, yes.
Okay. Harold?
Chair, you referred there to trade, and obviously with the Brexit now, we should be reaching out even further to outside of the EU. And I'm coming from the pigs end of it again. The question has been asked recently in December, but I'm asking it again because I still can't get an answer to why are we not, that there is a market out there for what's known as the fifth quarter. That's the ears, the hooves and those waste products, which are being incinerated at the minute at a cost to the environment. And yet, China will pay £5 per pig. There's 21,000 pigs slaughtered in Northern Ireland each week. £5 could be paid to the farmer for every one of those pigs. Plus there's an additional £5 which would go to the processor. That works out about £250,000 a week that we are not getting as Northern Ireland PLC. And could you answer me, I know that we refer to maybe China, consul, whatever, is looking into it, but still nothing has been done, and I think we're missing a golden opportunity because England, Scotland, Wales are doing it. We are not doing it. China have now jumped to some of the other European countries to supply them with it, so obviously they're looking for the product, and we are sitting on our hands.
The first thing I have to do, Mickey, is to correct any thought anybody has that we're sitting on our hands. This is our China as a market is our front and centre priority, and the number of visits by ministers, members of the executive and my own staff to China in the last 18 months, 2 years, they run into double figures. Contact with China is almost on a weekly basis. But China does illustrate very graphically the difficulty in trade with third countries. The US once said to me that no one has the right to export product into our country, and we'll make it as difficult for you as possible. And that's almost the way to think about it. If you turn it round, how easy do we make imports for other countries, other third countries? Not very might be the answer. And it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. The difficulty with agriculture products of agricultural origin, is that as well as a normal trade deal that might be done to sell tractors or machinery or aircraft even, is that there's a second layer after the trade deal has been done by the politicians, and that's around the standards and what they call the sanitary and phytosanitary rules. And that's where the veterinary departments come in and talk to each other. And that's what the long negotiations are about And the average trade deal takes somewhere between 2 and 10 years. That's the average one. And I understand, Harold, the frustration, but I'm trying to put some reality into this.
Just, I can't get my head around why England, Scotland, Wales could do it and we're not. Well, why are we so different?
Their industries asked earlier, they got the deal done. We have country approval, just as the rest of the UK has. The problem is with a particular product, pig's feet, trotters, where we didn't get specific approval at the same time as they did, mainly because we didn't ask for it. It did be included in those inspections. And now we're on the back foot on it. So we've gone a long way through the process. We have the confidence of both of the government organisations in China that deal with this. We have had the inward inspection. We have corrected deficiencies that were found. We have gone back to China with those, and we're now waiting for the very last bit, which is for them to give us the final okay. And this is literally sitting on someone's desk somewhere. Trade's very complicated. It's a mixture of politics and science and relationships. And we have done everything that could be done here. We have all the right people talking to the right people. We have a bureau in Beijing who's working at it, a man on the spot working on this particular issue. So what I'm doing is reassuring, or trying to provide reassuring that all is being done on this issue that can possibly be done, Harold. But that doesn't prevent the frustration of the farmer out there, or indeed the processors who just want to get there.
Thank you, Robert. And I know that a lot of work was done in the last mandate in terms of that. I know that the department did put a lot of work into that. So, Kiva?
My question is around R&D, and obviously it's highly dependent on EU funding. I presume that will be a priority going forward, looking for where we might replace that funding from. I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, but in terms of Horizon 2020, I presume we still are able to take part as partners, but maybe not lead on projects after we leave.
I think I'm not fully on top of what the situation is when we leave. I mean, at the minute we're in Horizon 2020 projects. AFBI are in Horizon 2020 project. I know that there are certain areas of countries that are not in the EU who can benefit from Horizon 2020 projects. I think that's where your question is coming from. And I don't think you can be a lead partner, but I'll maybe it's better if I come back to you with the facts on that. But yes, what our access to any funding regimes, that'll be part of a negotiation. But yes, it is an issue for us, yes.
Thank you. I suppose just coming back to the stuff around exports and exporting to China and everywhere else, and that's all extremely important. But would you agree with me that a priority is north-south? We're all on this one island. That is a massive priority for us, and that's really what we need to focus on, a plan for north and south, for Ireland as a whole.
Well,
post-Brexit?
Yeah, I mean, in answer to Mr. Anderson's question, I did reference trade, but you're absolutely right. I mean, and if you had industry representatives in here, they would say cross-border trade is absolutely vital for us. It is a priority, and I should have said that as an element of what I said to Mr. Anderson.
No, that's fine. Patsy, sorry.
Yep. Chair, thanks very much. I just wanted to capture, sort of distill or clarify in my own mind then the audit that you're carrying out. Now, from what I've listened to and heard you say in there, it'll, if you like, sort of capture 3 elements. Now, I might be wrong on this, but maybe you can, if we like, there's the financial support implications, right? And that ranges from the R&D that Kiva referred to, right across departmental, right across arm's length bodies and the likes.
Yeah.
In other words, what would be absent from EU that we're presently getting? There's the trade and business implications, if I'm picking that up right. Then there's the wider legislative and policy implications. Would that be fair enough to distill those into those 3 broad headings, or is there something else that I'm missing there?
Yeah, there are lots of implications. Louise, I'll bring you in just to look across the piece in a second. But yeah, so with trade, money, legislation. As I said earlier, there's what impact this would have against all of our current plans. Okay.
Yes.
So there's that element to it. There will be staffing implications and skills that we want as well. So it does go right across the department. Louise, do you want to come in on that?
Well, it was simply to confirm that those are three of the core strands that we have initiated our analysis on, and coming back to the question that was asked by Mr. Ford earlier on about we'll be drawing that analysis together over the next month or two.
And would that be available for us, Chair, for our September meeting, that audit?
Well, we'll be doing internal work, and I'm very happy, and I would have thought you would have been calling us back anyway. Yes, in terms of where we've got to on this.
Now, and then, if you like, the mechanisms that you're establishing for working with the Westminster government, and indeed particularly with the Irish government, because we've already heard of the trade implications, but I would reckon that there needs to be at least one friendly face out in Brussels that can be approached and keep abreast of what clearly there's a commonality of interest there too. So I think that is paramount as well.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm already arranging to meet with my counterpart and the ministers, as I said, meeting in the NSMC. I mean, the executive will obviously look at what its own representation will be in Brussels. You know, if it wants to do. I mean, the UK will continue to have a permanent representation of some sort in Brussels, I would have thought, and we need to consider our own and what element of that will be. But that's further down the line as well. Yes.
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
Well, so I mean, if you take, we're still going to be trading with the EU.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we'll need to think, well, what are the implications? We already have, the executive already has an office in Brussels.
Yes.
So we just need to think about how we work our way through that. I'm involved with Andrew McCormick in leading a group just looking at how we deal with our current European priorities, and no doubt that will come up as part of that.
Okay, right. Thanks, Chair.
William?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Robert had some concerns in and around exports to the Irish Republic. Given that the Irish Republic exports a massive amount of their agri-food produce into the mainland Britain, would it not be, I would have thought it would be crazy for the Irish Republic to want tariffs, because it would back, I know they wouldn't, but if the EU imposed tariffs, it actually would help Northern Ireland, because it would make our product easier sold in the British market.
Yes, but we on some commodities, that wouldn't be enough. And yes, there are opportunities, and that's what we have to look at. But really, a lot of this is crystal ball gazing, because we don't know, and the last thing we want to do is actually scare any markets by thinking too much ahead without the facts. So yes, there might be, but it's difficult to see how agriculture would continue as we know it on this island without some degree of movement of the products back and forward, whether that be totally free as it is at the moment or whether it be with tariffs. Once you start talking about tariffs, of course, that starts to alter the market. And obviously those that are paying the tariffs are at a disadvantage to those who are not, if you're then trying to go out into, say, the UK market. So there will be swings and roundabouts in that, and that's why, as soon as the direction of negotiation starts to emerge, we need to have these structures and arrangements with London, who are leading in the negotiations, to ensure the Northern Ireland unique position is heard. And of course, the highest part of our unique position is the land border with another member state.
Interestingly, I was speaking to one auctioneer there about a couple of hours ago, and he said actually Brexit hasn't created any problem for land prices, because they're up this last week or 10 days. 40p a kilowatt, and they're all exported to the Republic, or mainly exported to the Republic.
It certainly puts a base in the market.
Yeah.
I think that's all very well, but I still think that it is vitally important that we're dealing with the Republic, because we need to have a good relationship with them. At the end of the day, whatever negotiations happen between the UK government and Europe are all very well, but we need to be sure that the Irish Republic are protecting our interests as well, to a certain degree, and looking at this as an island and thinking of us to the fore, because we want them to see us as valuable as Europe to them, and we have to remember they're still going to be within Europe, so that's going to create
I don't think I
some difficulties. No, I
hope you don't think that I said anything that made any difference to that.
I don't. I'm just
absolutely
making the point again.
I think it's more important for the Irish Republic to be friendly with us than us with them even. So it's vital for them too.
Just be friendly all around.
Absolutely. That's the way we are.
Oliver?
Just quickly, thanks, Chair. I think one thing that needs to be emphasised when if in any negotiation is that the 90 to 95%, maybe more, of the farms here are owned. But over 90% of the farms in England, Scotland and Wales are tenant farmers. They're not owned, and that's a massive difference. And we're coming here from an island, and we're exporting out of an island. And that has got to be taken into consideration because we're talking about the periphery of land borders with a European country. We're an island, and that has got to be put up there to these negotiations, because what we've seen coming out of the Westminster so far, and considering that's a government that has cut the money to the farmers twice, once in Westminster and once in Europe. And if we're relying on them to negotiate on our behalf, we've got to be putting up a full basket of what we have here.
I mean, all I can do is reiterate, Mr. McMullen, you know, the Minister for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, that is very conscious of that, very conscious to get the best deal for Northern Ireland, very conscious, as you're quite rightly said, the importance of exports, hence, you know, the emphasis on trade, and particularly for us here. So, absolutely agree. Sure, just on time, there are a few. I should have said a few closing remarks that I wanted to make. So just now, very quick.
Well, just
I wasn't trying to get to them. I wasn't trying to get to them now, but just to say when you're thinking of time.
Just quickly before you do, just I suppose to. And you've already alluded to it yourself anyway, the committee will definitely be wanting to get regular updates. Obviously this is going to be a massive issue going into the future, and I accept that there are uncertainties for all of the groups. There's uncertainty for the department, and they don't know what's happening at the minute. What I would say is we do want regular updates. I did look at the possibility of having a special committee during the recess. I don't see the value in that unless you're going to have something to tell us, because I don't want to be bringing people here unless there's value in it. However, if at any point during the recess that we do think that there is, you know, that needs to be a discussion or anything comes up or things move on quicker than we anticipated, we will look at that again, and we probably would go for a meeting in that case. So just to make you aware of that we would be looking at that.
So I wasn't trying to interrupt.
No, you're okay.
I wasn't trying to interrupt questions.
You're okay.
Yes. Just a few things I would want to emphasise again, that we do remain committed to our financial plans and the implementation of CAP, continuing to roll out the RDP and deliver payments, that we need to execute, authorise those and account for them and apply regulations and continue our business. There may be issues that arise at a national level which will have implications for the future of our EU funding and our programmes in the future. We'll make the committee aware of that if that does arise. And I would just say, Chair, we were here, I can't remember when it was, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and talking to you, and just to emphasise, you know, the Executive continues to have a programme for government. David only yesterday was working on that, and a cross-departmental team on that. The department continues to have a business plan, continues to have strategic plans, and the Minister will set her priorities out in that. I certainly don't want to get ahead of the Minister, but just to emphasise, and a point you made, you know, we'll continue to work with local government. So it's not that things are stopping. We're continuing to do our business. This is a massive issue, and I don't decry that, but I just want to say we continue to do our business. This will have major implications for the department in the department's business, its legislation, how it operates. We're very conscious, and we will keep the committee updated.
Thank you very much. Nobody else had indicated that they want to come in, so I know that the other officials had said that they could remain if needs be, but as that's not the case, we're happy to say that's the permission. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members will see in their packs. Okay. Members will see in their packs press release, which I had intended to release. So I just want to check that members are agreed that they're happy enough that we issue that press release.
Table pack, page 3.
Sure, I have been coming across this morning in regards to opportunities. I don't think I've seen anything around opportunities. Is there any way we could add something in there that there's many challenges facing us, but possible opportunities as well?
Want to amend the title to
You are suggesting the word possible before opportunities?
Well, opportunities.
possible opportunities?
I thought possible opportunities sounded much more realistic.
Okay.
Everybody agrees, but it's not all doom and gloom. At the end of the day, we don't know what's down the line.
I think that's a fair
We have
point.
challenges, but we have opportunities as well
We could put it in there, we're put in possible implications of the recent EU referendum to use meeting as the first opportunity.
Yeah.
You could say implications, we could say
Implications and
Where's that
and
at?
opportunities.
Where's that at?
First
At
phrase,
the very
first
first paragraph.
the very bottom line, stakeholders on the possible implications and opportunities.
Okay.
Is that okay?
This implication is not both positive and negative.
Yeah, I
actually.
would have thought, just
That's taken a neutral word and added a negative.
Possible concerns and opportunities? Concerns and opportunities?
Or challenges and opportunities.
Challenges and opportunities.
Challenges, that's what I was thinking. Challenges and opportunities.
Challenges and opportunities, okay?
No, we don't know what's down further down the line. All right.
No, that's okay, we'll leave that.
Okay. Okay, members agreed then? Happy enough?
Anybody else?
Thank you. Also wish to take the views of members in relation to how we as a committee might deal with the issues arising from Brexit. So I would suggest that we seek an oral or written briefing from the department on a monthly basis to begin with. And such briefings may become more frequent as information comes to the light. Okay. Request a scoping paper from DARA covering all matters, cross-policy, budget and legislation that will be affected in the DARA remit. Well, I think that has been addressed. They are going to do that, and as soon as that's ready, they're going to bring that to the committee. So I think that's fair enough. The department's already.
I would just like to add into that one there, if you don't mind, sorry, Chairperson, jumping in, about that aspect about the international obligations and standards outside of the EU legislation that we would still have to meet that was raised. So I would like to add that aspect in as well.
It'd be important the department keep us up to speed with that too. You may find they're the overruling ones.
And maybe press them on that for our first committee meeting in September that we would be held that update.
You work away there, Patsy?
Okay, commission research on the impact that Brexit may have on agriculture, environment and rural affairs, similar to the research papers produced by other legislators which were emailed the week. Okay. And send the Hansards of the meetings with the stakeholders to the department for information, asking officials to note and ensure the concerns that are raised, whatever deal or negotiations happen. Okay. I know.
So maybe even actually if we had that paper that they're talking about for our strategic planning day.
Yes, if not for the first meeting in September, then the planning day, yeah.
Well, I'm sure people would really need to be dealing and looking at what is possible within WTO For example, you know, we currently have a land-based support scheme for farming. I think America has a different scheme which would be more directed. Now, I know Oliver gets very excited about the land-based one. I'd much prefer to see a suckler cow premium brought back again, and you know, a sheep premium brought back again, which would be supporting farmers in the hills, but not to be letting the hills grow wild, to actually be doing something on them. And I think there's far better schemes out there to be done than the one we currently have, which doesn't encourage production and doesn't encourage efficiency in farming. I think aside from that, we also need to be looking at this whole regulatory framework. I have to say, Barclay Bell's response was pathetic. If that's leadership coming from the Farmers Union, I just think that's disastrous, because there are so many regulations out there that are not imposed by supermarkets, they're imposed by the European Union. And if we can divest ourselves of a number of those regulations, which will improve farm efficiency. For example, you know, post-Brexit, can a farmer go out and cut his heads a bit earlier, a bit later, plough in the winter time? Can he spread slurry on the 9th of January if there's been 2 weeks of sustained dry weather, as opposed to waiting until the 1st of February and maybe wet weather has kicked in by that stage? All of those practical outworkings, where an awful lot of it doesn't make sense. We need to actually rid ourselves of it. You know, if we're going to do research, we'll have to get serious research done into what can be achieved and what are the benefits that can be achieved for the rural community, you know, through Brexit.
Well, I think that we need the information first to be able, you know, to be able to look at that and see what actually we can or can't do, because there are things that we're not going to be able to change, even though we have went for Brexit. So I think that we need to have all of that information first.
Well, it depends whether you're full Brexit or partial Brexit.
Well, I don't agree, because we were told here today that there are international laws that we
There's
have,
international
you know,
laws as well.
So
The other aspect of it we need to investigate: would it be in Northern Ireland's interests if we were to have full Brexit as opposed to staying in the free trade agreement? Because UK is a large importer of food. We export a considerable amount of food that actually the UK imports. If Europe imposes an 18%, I think it's 18% tariff on British food going out, or UK food going out, and the same is imposed upon others going in, that may well be to the advantage of farmers in Northern Ireland. I don't know, but we need to test these things out and investigate them thoroughly as to see what is in our best interest.
I think that, I suppose, is the bottom line. We don't know, and we're not going to know until negotiations begin. And I suppose we as a committee need to be ensuring that we ensure that our minister makes the best case for us, but we're relying on our minister to make the best case to another government who will then make the best case.
But with respect,
and whether they do or don't,
if we don't know till negotiations start, we need to be investigating those things before negotiations start, so that we actually make an input and say, this is what we believe would be in our best interests and the interests of the people that we're elected to serve. We're in a situation that probably most of us didn't expect to be in. That's the situation we're in. We now need to make the best of it.
Okay, what do members? Yep.
Perhaps we really would be talking about a consultation period, where you will be consulting, you know, what is your evidence, what is best. You know, I keep thinking of the slurry issue there, you know, and there's health and safety issues around putting slurry out at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning just to beat a deadline. You know, and I think there's lots of things that we, you know, from the farming community sector could have an input in before others get their input.
Okay. I agree with what you're saying. We need to look at all of this. We are going to have, I'd say, many consultations on what's going to be done in the future. I don't think it's going to be overnight. I think that what was said earlier on about we have 2 or 3 years, it's not going to come near what we need to negotiate any of this stuff. And Robert alluded to it too, that in terms of agriculture, it's more complicated than anything else. So even within the EU, so we have major challenges. I don't think that this is going to be straightforward for us to deal with. Sorry, Oliver.
I think you're quite right, and I wouldn't disagree with the most of what was said around the table. I think we need to be sending a letter to the Minister expressing our concerns, because the one thing that we don't have is dates when negotiations start or all of this kicks off. So I think what was said there, we're left in limbo wondering how long do we have to put our thoughts together. So, if we raise our concerns now with the Minister in a letter, then we may get an answer. The Minister may find out, I don't know whether she's even been told yet or not when these start,
But this will be years, it's not about weeks.
That's correct, yes. It could be years, it could be next month, you don't know, whatever.
I mean before they're concluded, before we leave.
Yeah, but we need to, I agree with you, we need to have our thoughts down on paper. So I think we need to raise that with the Minister and express our concerns that we need time to put that down, to get things put together.
Okay, are members happy that we write to the Minister and ask her as soon as she knows or has any idea of a timeline even for the beginning of negotiations that we will be made aware of that?
Although is the Minister going to know any more than we will know when the Conservative Party decides that it's got a new leader is going to do something? We need to be kept in touch by the Department of its ongoing thinking. I think that's what Noel's already promised to us. I don't know there's much more than that we can ask the Department at this stage.
Boris, anyway.
I would agree.
Boris is away.
He will.
Okay.
I don't want
Okay, the next agenda item then is a report on the Grocery Code Adjudicator Conference, and members will find a briefing paper on this in their table pack, page 3. And Harold's going to give us, he's at the Grocery Code Adjudicator Conference. Okay, Harold, we have 4 minutes for this.
Thanks, Chair.
Been reduced.
Chair, I don't know if I can add a big lot more than what you have in the report, but you wrote up the report. I will firstly thank Ella and Ciara for their help and obviously making it allowing me to go across there, and it turned out an interesting meeting. And I think the fact that it fell just post-Brexit, because there was a few issues that rose at it, but I think one of the main ones, the grocery adjudicator who spoke a long time on the issues around Tesco and the importance of what GCA are doing, obviously addressing a lot of issues. And funny, even today it was raised there, I think NIAPA raised an issue there about retailer regulations enforced may not be anything to do with EU. So retailers are actually forcing to receive the report. They are putting pressure under some of their suppliers. For example, the artwork and design that you go into these farmers smiling with a hen under their arm. It costs a lot of money. It's a supplier paying for to put that ad up there, and that's okay. And then if we go on to, well, obviously a lot of figures there from the guest speaker, Gavin Ellison, who worked for YouGov, research director, and he put a lot of good, interesting figures. I've only named a few of them there. And the other guest speaker, Ian Wright, CBE Director General of the Food and Drink Federation, he did speak a lot on, in his words, he was disheartened by the outcome of Brexit, because he said 70% of his members wanted to remain. And he said Remain had no plan B, but Brexit had no plan at all. But on the back of that, he did say, which I think was important, and summing up, Ian said, we are where we are, and if we work together, we can make the United Kingdom work. There's no place for divisiveness between retailers, farmers, manufacturers and processors. We need each other more than ever. So like he, who was so hard against where we come and where we are now, but he believes if we work together, we can make it work. And I'm hearing this more and more. Last night I went along to a meeting in Canal Court, and the Chief Executive of Norbury addressed the meeting, and he was very strong on that as well. We are where we are but if we want to make it work, we must work together to make it work. And I think that's generally the outcome of where we are sitting here today as a committee for DAERA. You know, and I think we need to move forward in that. There will be difficult times ahead, but I think with regard to the groceries code, it's very important that there's a consultation which is just launched in the day that I was over there, and it's so important that our suppliers get involved with that consultation, because it appears to be it may reach out to, and obviously this is down to whoever will respond to the consultation, that reach out to indirect suppliers to the main supplier, which is very important. And GCA apparently will be in a position to deal with that situation, but it's all down to the response in this consultation. So if you know anyone out there is in the supply and trade, it gets stuck into that consultation.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Appreciate that. And apologies to membership, it's actually on page 7 of your table of papers, so I had some difficulty finding that. Okay, matters arising then, and if I can just draw your attention, page 35 to 90, and ask if members are content to action the items on matters arising as suggested in the index, page 35 to 40.
Chair, I'm happy enough with what's there. Was this supposed to be a response to everything we asked? Because I asked specifically about infraction proceedings on European directives, and unless it's buried at the bottom end of the second paper, I haven't found it.
No, we haven't got everything in yet that we've asked for. We're looking at how we will be, we're keeping a table, and we'll be bringing that to the committee in September about where we are on things we've been asked.
On the tyres, the cost to farmers, they still haven't addressed the query as to why they're charging such a large amount of money.
I will right back on that one.
We really should be calling for that charge to be scrapped.
Okay. Any other? So are we content then?
Content.
Apart from the points that have been raised, yeah, okay. Agenda item 10 then, the correspondence index sheet at page 92. Our members agreed to action the correspondence as suggested.
Indeed.
Okay, okay, that's agreement. Okay, agenda item 11 then, our forward work programme. There is a paper on page 106 of the pack outlining the proposed timescale for the budget process 2017 to 2020 and BFG 2016 to 21. I wish to seek the committee's agreement on the work programme as outlined, and that the clerk writes to the department asking for information on PFG and budget for the meeting dates noted in the memo, and the clerk writes to stakeholders for their views.
Okay, Chair, I'm happy with what's there. What's not there is the Minister. And I do think we're at the point that we should be having a visit with the Minister before we go too far into September, preferably before our strategic planning day. That may not be possible, but... Yeah.
What we should probably be requesting is that the Minister come as part of that first delegation that we have asked to come back and tell us how things are going. I mean, that really that would be the...
Come to the planning day for an hour. What date's the planning day?
I'm not sure, but I think that this may be the only committee that hasn't had the Minister before.
I'm not sure we're the only, but we're certainly in a minority as I
Yeah.
understand it.
We are. And then that the next committee meeting will be the 8th of September, which will focus on the budget and written briefings. If the budget information is not available, are members content to go ahead with the meeting on the 8th of September or defer until the 15th? Well, I think we'll go ahead with the 8th because we are going to have a lot of stuff
Given the amount that's ahead of us, I think we should be saying we need the budget information the 8th of September.
And again, as I've already raised with the Permanent Secretary, if I feel during the summer that something arises that would, require us to meet, are members happy enough that I would call a meeting if I feel it's necessary?
Yep.
Clerk will contact everybody and, and I suppose if it is going to be something that's happened in the recess, it's going to be very specific. So we're talking about a very focused, specific meeting on an issue. There's a clerk's memo on page 108 of the packs outlining the programme in the Northern Ireland Environment Week. And the committee has already agreed to sponsor the events in the Lawn Gallery during this week. Can I just seek agreement on the guest list, the agenda, and to light the columns in the Great Hall green for the launch, and that a member from each party provides a welcome ahead of each seminar scheduled for the Tuesday.
Good.
Okay, all agree.
Agreement, okay. And I mean, Stella will be in touch with you just in terms of getting those names for the.
Yeah, so we're looking for one member
Harold.
from each party. Harold. Which of those seminars they want to sort of do, they meet and greet at? Yeah.
Patsy and me.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to try to go through some of these now. I have to leave at 1 for the roundtable discussion, GM Foods, and if we haven't concluded at that time, Kiva will take over. But
The Justice Committee's in this room after us, so we do need to be out probably for about 1:15 to allow the room to be cleaned and reset up for them. So.
Have we a date for the planning day?
29th, yeah, it's the last Thursday in September.
Last Thursday in September. Okay, thank you.
Right, so I'm going to assume that members have read their papers, and I'm just going to ask for views. Agenda item 12 is the SL1, the Rathlin Island Regulations 2016, prohibition of fishing methods.
Chair, page 135, in regard to the consultation responses, concerned the dredge ban was only supported by 22% of respondents, but the information doesn't give any detail as to who responded, what they said, one thing or another, so I'd like to see more detail on the responses of the public consultation.
Okay. We will get that before we agree the SL1 then? Yeah, so that's fine.
Yeah, so we'll move on then.
Yeah.
Okay. Agenda item 13 then. SL1, the Pollution Prevention and Control Industrial Emissions Amendment Regulations NI 2016. That's the SL1 policy proposal, and that's on page 139 of your packs. The draft regulation is at page 143, and you'll also see the equality screen on page 146 and summary document 147. The rule is subject to the negative resolution procedure, and it is anticipated that it will come into operation in July 2016. Members have any comments on that? Okay. We're content then that it proceeds to its next stage. Okay. Agenda item 14 then is a written briefing consultation on the packaging waste regulations NI 2016. The consultation will commence on the 1st of July and will last for 8 weeks until the 26th of August. Members have any comments on that paper? No. Okay. So we're content to note until the outcome then of the consultation. Okay. Okay, agenda item 15 then, the SL1, the Water Environment Water Framework Directive Amendment Regulations NI 2016, and that proposal is on page 205. It's subject to the negative resolution and is expected to come into operation the 12th of October 2016. Do members have any comments on that paper? Okay, so we're content to let it proceed to the next legislative. Okay. Agenda item 16 then is the SL1, the Carlingford area definition of the mouth of the Clanray River, Regulations 2016. proposals that draft regulations and equality screening and regulatory impact assessment are page 215. The rule is subject to the negative resolution, and also before the Irish Parliament. It is anticipated to come into operation later in 2016. Do members have any comments on this? Happy then to let it proceed to legislative stage. Agenda item 17, SL1, the Foyle area and Carlingford area exemption from angling licensing fees, regulations 2016. Do members have any comments?
Yeah.
Robin? Yeah.
Chair, in regard to the exempted bodies, just more information. Persons or bodies who have entered written contracts with the Lochs Agency. There's no management as to numbers as to how many that may actually be. So if a body enters into a contract with the Lochs Agency, are they permissible to give out 100 free fishing licences?
Okay.
No detail there. Also, the Lochs Agency is asking very specifically for the private river watchers, which are volunteer bailiffs, on that section of the Carlingford to have free licences, basically, and I'm sure that's as a reward for the voluntary work they're doing. I just want to know why they didn't extend that. As the fact that we're now one department, why that's not extended to all private river watchers across Northern Ireland, if there's any intention to extend that to them.
Okay. Well, again, are you happy enough to get that written response for September? Do you want to defer agree on this SL1 until September?
Please.
Okay.
Well, there's even a slightly wider thing in the way Robin's put it, which is there are other people doing similar things in other aspects of our rivers. You know, and I mean, Robin's point, if it's a joined up department, you'll be doing one order covering everything.
Okay. Agenda item 18 then. Any other business? Anybody want to raise any other issues?
Just very quickly, I was supposed to throw the adjudicated report there. Tesco's were fined 1.3 million and they were only allowed to pay 85% of it. I find that astounding considering what they've done.
No, I think the work that was undertaken by the Grocery Code Adjudicator cost 1.3 million. I can't remember the exact figures. Tesco's paid 85% of the work. It wasn't a fine.
But you see, they got away with that. What they done was totally wrong. It either proves that the Grocery Code Adjudicator has no teeth that way, you know, because if these supermarkets can do that again, they misled the country on their profit margins.
Okay, if you're happy, I can write to the sponsoring department suggesting that the percentage amount that the Grocery Code Adjudicator is able to charge in supermarkets is reviewed to potentially be on 100%.
And there should be a fine there for supermarkets that got misleading the whole country on their profit. Okay. That's
percentage. Okay.
Okay, Oliver, thank you.
Oh, sorry,
Harold, yes.
There will be, just to go back to, that was the first, the agriculture one. It was a bit of in it here about a question I asked about Kilkeel Harbour infrastructure and all around that, and our dear committee and the gent that was here at the last here are very aware of the plan for Kilkeel Harbour, but there still seem to be uncertainties around, you know, assurances that they want from some of the maybe private investors that you know will really, it'll hinge upon their investment into it and their use of Kilkeel Harbour, particularly 3 boats we're talking about here, and with making the harbour larger out to sea, it will involve 3 additional fishing boats which belong to Kilkeel, but the minute they're too big to come in, it will have an investment of 25 million per year. Now, I think we've got to a point where it seems to sitting at loggerhead, and they need some ministerial post to take this thing forward. And I think, you know, either we as a committee or the seniors here, officials, need to go and sit down in the fish producer's office in Kilkeel with, and I'll name Alan McCullough, who's very much the pusher behind this here, and Seasource. And I think they need to hear from the developers, the planners, what their intention is here, to reassure them of some of the issues that I see they've raised in this document here. And I'm not sure how you take it forward, but either we as a committee meet at some point with them or the officials, or both.
We can, and as a first instance, Harold, if you're happy enough, we can write to the department to encourage the minister to sit down with the Anglo-Northern Ireland Fish Producers Association, which is Anna McCulloch's, and the members of the Kilkeel Strategic Harbour project, to see how they can move it forward.
Yeah, yeah.
If we can then get something back, if she does agree to meet with them,
Yeah.
if we can get a report back of what the outcome of that is.
Yeah, can report back. Okay.
Okay. That's everything then. Next meeting will be Thursday the 8th of September in room 30 at 10 o'clock. Hope you all have a lovely summer.
30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly